Hey everybody, what up though? One Pride Nation, Matthew Turner here, awaiting the return of the Anthony Fitzpatrick as he just takes a short break after the college football show, which ran for 2 hours, 20 minutes, and is pulling double duty, so we need to give him a break while he just goes and get a cup of tea. Hope everyone's doing well. Just give a shout out to everyone in the chat right now. There's Brian Shook, Brent DeWitt, Jethro C, Matthew Grizak, Free Climb, and at Jack in YouTube, as well as Lost Oceans, and David Reinfurt in Twitch as well. If you're in the chat, come and say hi. Would love to hear from you. Would love to hear how your week has gone. The Lions are the number one team in the NFL. This is where we're at right now, and what a role reversal for a Lions team that has spent the best part of 20 years at the opposite end of the spectrum. We will have a guest from the UK Ravens. We're going to have Ashley joining us in about 10 minutes' time, and he's going to help us break down the Baltimore Ravens for us. I was in London for Ravens Tennessee, so I can't pretend I had the best seats, especially from an all-22 point of view, but I did get to see them up close and personal, so it's going to be interesting to break them down. Shook saying Ryan always just talks like he's mad. You can't read his mind, and he has to waste his voice to express his usually correct opinion. I'm there with you, Brian. Ryan is on the money most of the time, but he never betrays anything. He's got a great poker face. And I appreciate it very much because I never know what's coming out of his mouth. Dan Pasca's in the chat and GA2 Skip as well. Appreciate you all being here. If you've got any questions, as always, just don't forget to at the channel with your question and I'll get it in the show. We're going to be breaking down a little bit of news that has come out recently, and then we're going to get into the Lions-Ravens preview, which will include the betting odds, the injury report, the IR for the Ravens, their starting lineup, the statistical analysis on their offense, defense, a look at their most recent game, and then the ways to win and key matchups. As here comes the Fitzpatrick. Dan, I'm doing well, mate. How are you doing? And hey, Lisa, thanks for joining us for double duty. How you doing, Ant?
I'm doing good, cheers.
It's a long old shift, mate.
Yeah, well, it's what we do it for, innit?
For the love of the game.
Love of the game.
Oh, I don't have a Royal Alliance hoodie yet, but I'm feeling similarly dressed, so maybe not with the...
It's just gone so cold this last week. It's like it's gone from me thinking I might not need to put on my heating all year to being like, yeah, you do. And obviously Storm Babette's now here and it's raining and thinning it down everywhere and it's going to be terrible till Saturday, so...
Ugh, I hate it. It's like you're running a bath, the weather is the bath, and someone just turned the hot tap off, and suddenly it's feeling a little chilly.
It was. And it was just nasty this afternoon. I keep thinking, good God, it's going to play around with the internet and stuff like this. But it's been all right so far. It's dry, but it's gone very bitter. So this hoodie's amazing. I'm not just saying it because it's merch. It's just a very, very comfortable hoodie, it's now my go-to for when I'm around the house.
The beautiful thing about you is that if you didn't actually like it, you wouldn't even not say anything. You just say, it's a bit shit, but whatever. So the fact that you're saying it's actually good is quite nice. I need to get one. Anyway, Ashley is going to be joining us at 9 our time, so in 5 minutes. So I reckon if I start now, I'll get through the preamble and we'll actually start talking about the Ravens as he arrives. Hopefully. That's my wish. So does that sound good?
Yeah.
And I also think you'll like my name for the show, but I don't know, but this is one of my better ones. But only if you get it. I hope you get it. Here we go. You ready?
If it's a She's So Raven thing, then I'm quitting.
I've never watched that show.
I'm quitting. What do you mean you've never watched it?
I'm too old for it.
You're older than me and I've watched it.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen it. I'm too old for it.
Wow.
Also,
Wow.
I didn't have Nickelodeon when I was growing up because I wasn't, made of money. So
I have to buy you the box set for Christmas.
Lost Ocean said, wait, how old are you? I'm 33. It was on when I was getting into sort of mid to late teens, I think.
When's your birthday?
April 14th.
Oh shit, you're younger than me.
Right, let's go for this anyway. Let's do it.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Royal Alliance UK podcast, episode 225. If there's any justice in the world. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside my co-host Anthony Fitzpatrick. How you doing, man?
I don't know how to feel about that title, but I love Lamar, so you've appealed to my sense of R&B there. I am a very big Lamar fan, so I will let that one go. That's pretty decent. So
I love it. Good. I thought I was going to play to your strengths there, so here we go. Right, we are going to be previewing Lions at Ravens. It's the battle for North supremacy. This is the North's Super Bowl right here because it is a battle of two division leaders. We're also going to have Ashley from the UK Ravens on, hopefully, in about 5 minutes' time to help us break this down. But before he gets here, we're going to do some preamble. Don't forget to join our Discord channel, and as the Lions keep winning, it becomes an even better place to celebrate your fandom. So a link's going in the live chat right now. And if you're listening on the audio podcast, you can have a look back at the live chat. So if you haven't seen the link before, go onto YouTube just for a second. You'll find the link there, and you'll find a great Lions community college football podcast. And a lot of people have stayed on, but if you're just listening on the audio pod, and it's going to be coming to your airwaves shortly, what did he talk about?
Week 7 of the college football season, a lot of good stuff went off. You're sort of getting to the business end of the season now, where one loss and your playoff hopes go up in dust. So yeah, there were a lot of great games this week, and then this weekend coming up, obviously, me and my credibility is on the line. Penn State playing Ohio State. I've called Penn State the winners of the Big Ten since the preseason, and they need to snap a record where they've lost 9 of their last 10 against them, and it's at the shoe. So there's a lot riding on it for me this weekend, and I'm very nervous.
I don't blame you. It's a big week, and I'm not going to lie. How much you know about football is been put on the line this weekend, because there's some big games, and everything you've said about Penn State is coming to a head. So as much as it is some team season on the line, I think you were saying, was it Eastern Michigan season on the line or whatever? You know, it's going to be Anthony Fitzpatrick's season on the line as well. I mean, if you're going to come back in the big watch, you've got to have a big week. So
I went 9-1 last week. Thank you very much. I went
8-2.
Yeah, well, I went 9-1. 9-1 is better than 8-2. So
it's true.
I know I've gone for a lot of I've gone for an emotional lot this week. I'm going to go about 2 or 3 wins. So but
we'll see.
I do it. I'm an emotional person. I bet on my emotions, and it's wrong. So, but I will never stop doing it.
That's what we love about you. Don't forget to like the show, sub to the podcast, rate, review, all that good stuff. You know how much that means to us and how much it helps us be seen by others with our size. It makes all the difference. Don't forget to add Lions Nation Unite on their Facebook group as well, facebook.com/Lions Nation Unite. Herman Moore's project to bring the best in Lions content creators together. We're also Twitch affiliated, YouTube monetized, and there's a tip jar down below. So if you're enjoying what you're listening to, any appreciation in that regard, much enjoyed by us, put towards probably our draft trip for 2024. We also do have a feedback form down below, so if you've got any suggestions about how to improve the show or just want to say hi, then you can do that in the YouTube description. And we've also launched our merch store, impressively modelled by Anthony Fitzpatrick at the moment, with a lovely hoodie. I love it. We've actually had quite a few sales the last week or so, and we've had some good feedback, as we have Ashley coming in at the perfect time.
There we go. I got the t-shirt as well.
I love it. I love it very much. All right. You got the hat as well?
The hat's in my living room. The hat's in my bedroom, sorry. But yeah, the hat's really nice. They're elasticated, so I love the elasticated cap. You even kept the sticker on yours.
I always keep the sticker on because I think it makes it look better. I don't know why. But you know it's good because it's got that flexi fit thing which the actual NFL hats have on.
Yeah, they're really good. I must admit they're really good. So not as good looking hats as the Air Force Chrome Domes this week, but hey ho, can't have everything in life.
They're so sweet. I love them so much.
If anyone happens to be going to the Air Force Navy game this week and can steal one of those helmets for me, I will be forever in your debt and I'll pay you well for it.
Hi, Ashley.
Hello. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. How's things?
Good. Yeah, not bad, thank you. How's audio
Audio's
for
great.
coming
No
through
worries on
for
that
you?
front.
Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sounding okay?
All good. Yeah, the video is on its side for this, but I think we'll work with that. It's all good. Yeah.
No
Right.
worries.
We have kicked things off with our preamble. We're live on YouTube and Twitch at the moment, and we're just about to hit the news. There's not a lot of it. And then we're going to kick off our previews. So, without further ado, Jared Goff named NFC Player of the Week on offense for Week 6. And Nickelback Brian Branch has confirmed to Detroit News reporter Justin Rogers that he will be playing against the Ravens this weekend. So positive news on both offense and defense for the Lions. Let's crack on then with this review. And actually, you're going to have to help us with a lot of this because the Ravens are a tough team to work out. Despite me being in Tottenham on Sunday, and I don't know whether you went as well, but it was an interesting game. We'll talk about that towards the end of the review as a most recent game analysis. But the Ravens are 4-2. Pro Football Reference has them an expected wins of 4.3, so you're actually slightly under expectations so far this season. You've had wins against Houston and Cincinnati and Cleveland and Tennessee, and losses to Pittsburgh and Indianapolis in overtime. The betting for this game has the Ravens favourites by 3 points. Over-under is 43. Ravens are 8-5 on. Lions 7-5. Just on a high level, Ashley, how's the season gone for you so far? Because I'm having a look at the teams and I'm thinking, losses against Indianapolis and Pittsburgh are not exactly what you're looking for. But then a win against Cincinnati, despite them not being amazing, is nothing to, sneer at. And then a really impressive win against the Browns, which is breaking all NFL records in terms of how historic this team is on defense. So it seems like a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde side to me. What do you make of it so far?
Yeah, I think if you'd have said to the majority of Ravens fans that we'd be 4-2 after week 6, people would say that feels about right. Losses to the Browns and the Bengals. That's probably, both on the road, tough games, tough opponents, division rivals. We'll maybe take the loss on that one and move on. But looking at the way the games have gone, it's hard for us not to see that we should be 6-0. Those losses to Indy and in particular Steelers, it's hard to refer to them as losses to those teams. It was more losses to ourselves. It's just an absolute litany of individual errors, coaching errors, breakdowns in communication, I think in both of those games. So the Indy game, there was a bit of a weird quirk with the timing where a kick was coming back to us, and unbeknownst to us, the time had been shifted from 1 minute 58 on the clock to 2 minutes and 3. So the plan for Zay Flowers receiving the kick was just fair catch it, doesn't matter. We're already at the 2-minute warning, so don't worry about it. When Harbaugh saw that the clock was actually at 2:03, he tried desperately to get the message down to say, no, grab it, hold it, 3 seconds, just then get down. Didn't get that in time. So suddenly we're in a position where we've gifted Indy a free timeout effectively late in the game that ultimately led to them getting that win. So it's things like that. The drops against the Steelers, just an historic day in all the worst possible ways against the Steelers in a game that should have been wrapped up by halftime. Realistically, we should have been in a position where halftime we scored 3 touchdowns. We're almost contemplating benching Lamar, ready for the trip to London. We're not worried about it. But they just hung around like a bad smell because we kept dropping the ball and fumbling. And it just feels like we're a team that, with no disrespect to Indy or the Steelers, we're a team that plays down to the level of our opponents. And when we find those games where we should be getting the win, we contrive new and interesting ways to shoot ourselves in the foot and stumble over the line. So I think what was encouraging about London last week was you could start to see signs of that. There was really positive signs in the first half. Zay Flowers getting his first touchdown was delightful. That was great to see. And it looked like things were working okay. start of the second half, it felt like the Steelers game again. It felt a bit slow and a bit clunky and a bit turgid. And then some questionable reffing calls that we won't go into, but we as a fan base have talked about a lot over the last 5 days. That just kind of felt like, oh no, this is one of those days where they're just going to hang around and they're scoring a few field goals here and they're getting a touchdown there. It's getting closer all the time. Are we going to find a way of shooting ourselves in the foot again? But then actually a few moments like a big OBJ catch, a big Mark Andrews seam down the middle, just gave us that momentum back and just said, no, actually, we are going to see this out. So I think there's some green shoots there. Overall, I think we're in a position, looking at the real sort of 30,000 foot view over the first 6 weeks, defense is elite. I think we knew that going in. Roquan is everything he was in the second half of last season, plus Marcus Williams and Carl Hamilton at safety are up there with one of the sort of best safety pairings in the league. Patrick Queen is taking leaps and bounds just by having Roquan around him. And there are some big leaps on the defensive line. Broderick Washington, Madubuike are really sort of stepping up in, for some of those guys, what are contract years, to turn that defense into a really powerful unit. Offensively, it's getting there, but you can still kind of see that we're 6 weeks into a new offensive coordinator. You can still see that there are some misfirings. You can still see that OBJ is not 100%. You can still see that Rashad Bateman's not 100%. So I just think there's a lot of things that aren't really clicking offensively, but our defense is always going to keep us in a game. That's how it feels after 6 weeks.
Absolutely. And what have you seen from the Ravens so far this season?
Well, a lot of what has been said. The defense has been really good, for the most part of the season. The way they've invested in there. I mean, there's so many of my favorite draft players in that defense. It's unreal, and they're turning into studs. And it's not
Travis Jones and Carl Hamilton in particular.
They're not using Travis Jones either. Like, Travis Jones is getting role plays. Just like, give him. I want him back. But Kyle's obviously balling out. Kyle's been as great as we thought he'd be. I was one of the Kyle at 2 guys last year. But no, the defense has been really good. The offense has been all right. There's been some issues here and there, and you have to sort of look at the team. I did this with the Bucks last week, and I feel like it was Graham didn't really like me for this last week. But you see the wins in there as well. Some of the more dominant wins. You're playing CJ Stroud in week 1 of his career with the Texans, with an offensive line that's banged up to holy hell there. And he's done so well with him. But then you've beaten the Browns, who started Dorian Thompson-Robinson, like his first game there with the season. You've got the dominant win, and you've got to beat who's in front of you there. And then the Titans. The Titans are an awful team. And the Titans hung around like long enough to be able to do something there. Like, that offense, it's maybe not been as explosive as I thought it would be, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because coming into this year, I had the Ravens down as an automatic loss, like all through the offseason. Like, go there. It's so dynamic. The run game, it's just innovative. It's very tough to defend against. Lamar's amazing at quarterback. You've got so many great guys in there. I've not seen that yet, like to the degree they can, but I don't think you've seen it at 100% really firing on all its cylinders yet in a lot of these games. The worst teams have hung around. So they're a really good defense. The offense has not quite got there yet. And like the Bucks, I respect this team, but I don't have the fear for it that's there. I don't have the fear I've seen from the Ravens in previous years, but they're still an incredibly tough nut to crack. And it's going to be incredibly hard to beat them. So I think that's where I'm at. The defense has highly got to be respected. Offense just hasn't fired on all cylinders for me yet.
I think the only thing that I'm going to say to add to what everyone else has said is that I think so far this is the best season of Lamar Jackson's career. Low key, and I know he's been an MVP, I don't think he's as explosive on the ground, despite the fact that he's still doing fantastically well on the ground. I think this is easily his best season passing. And more often than not, you have a look at the Ravens passing game, kind of Lamar has been a bit of a joke over his career as a sort of a guy who hopefully he gets there, but he's elite on the ground. Whereas now, he's a legitimate passing quarterback, and actually, is the rest of the team letting him down? Like, the number of drops by the wide receivers is just ridiculous. And it's a shame for the Ravens that they've been so good catching the ball and Lamar hasn't been getting it to them, and now he's getting it to them and they start dropping it. It's almost funny that he's made that leap. Lamar has made the leap for me. And it doesn't scare me as well. You're right. I'm with you, Ant, too. Like, I look at this team. I was there in London, like I mentioned. And I will come on to Todd Monken later. The play calling is odd on offense. Like, weird. And I don't know whether it's bad execution because it's a new scheme, or whether he's just not a good play caller. And I can't decide which one it is. It's only 6 games in. But it's a big question to answer. So that's where I'm at. Let's talk about injuries. Let's talk about the starters for the Ravens. With the injury report, we don't have anything out about today in full yet, I don't think, although I will reload the page. Yes, we do for the Lions. So, for the Lions, Jonah Jackson and David Montgomery were out for another day today, but it saw the return of Craig Reynolds, who was also out on Wednesday. He's back in a limited way today. Otherwise, Teddy Bridgewater was also limited as a new addition to the list. Otherwise, Brian Branch was limited, as well as Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, James Mitchell, Josh Pascal, and then Frank Ragnow, as he always is on the list, but he was full practice. For the Ravens, no information on today's yet. Clowney had vet rest day on Wednesday. Otherwise, Malik Harris and Odafe Oweh, both limited practice, and then not practicing Marcus Williams, Brent Urban, Caven Seymour. So obviously the list is significantly longer for the Lions. Oweh coming back could be a good, really big thing for the Ravens. And then Marcus Williams, we have to wait and see, I guess, because he got injured last weekend. I presume that Carl Hamilton isn't going to get some sort of ban for last week. And I don't know, actually, if that was one of the decisions you were alluding to last week, the Carl Hamilton hit. I'm just going to mention it here. What did he make of it?
Yeah, I've flip-flopped on that decision over the last few days. So what I will say as a side note, shout out to your YouTube comments for telling me that I was actually sideways on video. So I've hopefully rectified that. I was hoping it would kind of auto-correct, but it didn't. So I can confirm I'm not attached to the wall. So looking at it live, we all went up in unison and said, what a play. You know, he's made that tackle, he's flown in. It's that sort of classic thing that we always see with Carl Hamilton, which is you think he's too far away and then he's suddenly there. You know, he just crosses that field at an unbelievable speed. And that's what it looked like in this play. It looked like he'd gone up. Chris Moore had made the grab. Carl Hamilton had put in a big hit, but what looked like a fair hit. Seeing it in the stadium on the replays, you look at it and you go, right, you can see the argument for some helmet to helmet. You can see why there's a flag. You can see why there's a penalty. The ejection was the reason. I still felt that was egregious. Over the last couple of days, my feeling is more along the lines of I have to remove myself from Ravens fandom, which inherently puts a bias in me to say, I know Carl Hamilton's not a dirty player. I know that he's not the kind of guy that goes out to hurt people. On the flip side, you see Jeffrey Simmons going in on Zay Flowers' leg like a rabid dog trying to take it clean off. I don't know anything about Jeffrey Simmons, so that looks like a dirty play. I know Carl Hamilton's a hard player, but a clean player. So I think removing that bias, you have to look at it and say, player safety is paramount. Any kind of helmet-to-helmet contact increases the risk of serious injuries, concussions, all of those kind of things. It needs to be stamped out. It's impossible to judge intent when you're seeing it. So I think any definition of he meant it, he tried to hurt the receiver, he tried to do this, I think is nonsense. But if you look at it from a perspective of we need to look after players and there's nothing Moore could have done to soften that blow, to prepare for that blow or anything, I think Carl Hamilton was maybe a little high in the tackle, but you have to protect players. So I think on the basis that there is no additional sanction, i.e., there are no additional missed games or any longer suspension, I think it's fine. And ultimately, we came out of the game with the win, so it didn't materially affect the outcome. So my immediate passionate response was ridiculous. Refs are against us just because we're on TV and they want to keep it close in London. The sort of slightly more calm down objective view is, yeah, you get it. You can see it. You might not agree with it, but you can see it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you saw the hit, so tell me if you haven't, but it would meet the college definition of targeting, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah, but we're not in college. There's a lot of things in college that you can't do there. But to be honest, I didn't think it was an objectionable thing either. And I'd say that not just as a Kyle Hamilton stan, but, you know, I always verge on the let them play. It's like Tracy's hit that got picked up. Like, I don't think it was too different in intent from that, really. And we all just went up and went, yeah, fair play, that's great. And we were mad when the flag came out, but they saw sense. I don't think it was too different from that.
No,
so
I think
I think they got hard done by. It was just, I think it's like the angle where it's from. I think it looks worse than it actually is. And that's a lot of times what these refs go on. I think sometimes the slow-mos make it look worse than it is in real time. And again, Kyle Hamilton's never been a dirty player, like ever. He has always been a guy who will hit you so hard that you'll feel it. And that's just how he plays. That's the type of guy he is, but it's never malicious.
I mean, facing a smaller receiver when you're a 6'4" safety is going to make it more likely you hit someone in the head. Like, it just sucks for Kyle in a way, but it's also one of his biggest strengths. So I guess it's just something you've got to try and coach yourself out of. Because I think he just played high. I think that was all it was. But anyway. Moving on outside of the injury report to the IR list, and there's quite long for the Ravens. Running back J.K. Dobbins can't catch a break. Former Michigan man, outside linebacker David Ajabo's there. Wide receiver Tyron Wallace. On the NFI as well, Titus Bowser. And the player that basically every Lions fan wanted to draft late in day 3 in Andrew Voorhees, who I'm presuming is not going to play this season. Looking at the Ravens starters, obviously headed by Lamar Jackson, but they've got Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley in reserve. And then running back Dobbins may not be there, but a 3-headed monster of Gus Edwards, Justice Hilton, Keaton Mitchell at wide receiver. 5 deep potentially with Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, and Devin Duvernay, the exceptional return man. Tight end, you've got Andrews and Likely. Fullback Patrick Carr, one of the best in the NFL at that position. And then the starting offensive line is one of the better lines in the league in Ronnie Stanley, John Simpson, Tyler Linderbaum, Kevin Zeitler, and Morgan Moses. On defense, playing a base 3-4. We've got Justin Madubuike, Michael Pierce and Broderick Washington, outside linebackers of Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, as well as Tavius Robinson, and then Odafe Owe might be coming back. Inside linebackers, the best tandem in the NFL right now, and Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. The back 4, Brandon Stevens, Marlon Humphreys, Marcus Williams, and Kyle Hamilton, but also backed up very ably with the interception last week with Geno Stone, as well as Rock Ya-Sin, who I absolutely love, and Ronald Darby as well. It's a stacked team with plenty of backups. Oh, Trenton Simpson, I didn't even mention out of Clemson in this most recent cycle. On special teams, does he need any introduction? The MVP, Justin Tucker, the Lions fans will not forget, and Jordan Stout, the punter. I'll come to Ant first. This Ravens starting lineup, I know you said that the offense hasn't been firing on all cylinders right now, but if they did, it's an offense of names.
Oh, hell yeah. It's full of playmakers, like literally all over, which is why I'm surprised they've not broken the 30-point boundary yet this year with just how much you've got. You know, even with no Dobbins, like having Keaton Mitchell as your running back 3, I mean, 1,700 yards for East Carolina last year. Dude is a monster. He's very versatile in the way that he plays. It's obviously the running backs they like to draft. Justice and Gus really good as well. But Zay does just about everything. It's like he was the best gadget guy in college football by a long way. And I've got him in my fantasy team. I've got him in my starting team because I believe that much in him. And he can just hurt you so many ways, whether he's in the backfield, whether he's on sweeps, end arounds. I mean, and this is again why I've been surprised by why the offense hasn't seemed to utilize him as much so far this year, because he's just a key that unlocks everything. But they can play fancy, but they can also play brutal as well. Look at the tight end room. Andrews, Likely, Kohler. Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the NFL, full stop. Isaiah Likely is one of the best pass-catching tight ends, full stop. He's that good. And then you get down to Charlie Kohler, who's a great run blocker. Comes from Iowa State. He's built in that system, like Jack Campbell, like our Iowa guys. He's built like a brick house, and he can catch as well. So they've got fancy players. They've got down and dirty players. And then, you know, they've drafted really well. I've loved their last two drafts. And you look at the depth, guys, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be such a good team going forward. And the offensive line, it's like, it's good. But I think, you know, the weakness there is Ronnie. I think the injuries are catching up with Ronnie. He's been out for so long now. I think he's one of the poorer performers. At least it feels like it from what I've seen on there. And of course, he's the anchor there. But again, you've got Tyler Linderbaum, just great. I mean, the draft they had last year was insanely good. And then you go on defense and it's the same. You've invested highly in Roquan Smith. You've put him with Patrick Queen and Trenton Simpson, new guys out of college, just so athletic, so great. And then you've invested hard in your secondary as well. There's a lot to love about this team, and especially the way they're building the youth movement through the drafts. Been two of my favorite drafts the last 2 years. So, oh, absolutely. Me saying the offense hasn't been great is not a knock on it. It's more surprise for me that they've not done even more with the guys they've got. So it's difficult. You know, it's going to be really, really difficult for us. The only reason I believe so much is because I know what our team can do as well, and I know how our team can match up. But just on its own, looking at it, the Ravens team is set up well for now, and it's set up really well for the future.
I'm going to go into some of the offensive stats, then I'm going to throw the offense to Ashley to just have a chat about. So this team overall, per PFF, is 5th. DVOA has them at 6th. On offense, they're 9th by PFF. DVOA, they're 10th. And on defense, they have them 3rd at PFF and 2nd in DVOA. So some consistency by both those advanced metrics. On offense, obviously, Lamar Jackson, we mentioned, 121 completions on 173 attempts, 69.9%, 1,253 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, passer rating 93, QBR 56.3, and a PFF rating of 88.7, second highest in his career so far, but much higher passing grade than we have seen from him. Running back, led by Gus Edwards, 72 attempts, 282 yards, 3.9 yards per carry and 1 touchdown, also 3 of 4 for 13 in the passing game, PFF grade. 64.7, I can't speak apparently. Wide receiver, led by the rookie Zay Flowers, who's been a revelation, 35 catches on 48 targets, 367 yards, 1 touchdown last weekend as mentioned, PFF grade of 71.7. Mark Andrews, a tight end, 24 of 34 for 294 and 3 touchdowns. Similar PFF grade to Zay at 71.1. Other good grades in there. Morgan Moses at right tackle, 75.5. Tyler Linderbaum, the centre, 73.4. Some worse grades in there. The guard John Simpson, who's in relief, at 51.2. And Rashad Bateman at 51.6, the wide receiver. In terms of efficiency, 40 of 87 on third down is 46%. That's 5th in the NFL. They've only gone for it on 4th down 4 times and only converted once, 25% therefore, and 30th in the NFL, but the sample size is not anything to write home about. In the red zone is where they can do the business, although I'm going to come on to this later on when we talk about the Tennessee game. 14 touchdowns on 24 trips, 58.3% is 9th. Ashley, it's an offense which, you know, when it hums, it really goes. But it's been a bit stop and start, as you've kind of alluded to. But let's talk about Lamar in particular, because he has changed this year.
I think from an outside perspective, he has. We internally will always come back and say, but we knew he could do this. You know, this was not news to any of us. You know, he led the league in passing touchdowns in 2019 when he won unanimous MVP. So we all knew he was perfectly capable of doing this. He did it in Louisville. He won that. He ran that pro style offense there. So it isn't a surprise. I think it's just he is so effective with his legs that you'd be stupid not to use that as often as Greg Roman did. You'd be stupid, particularly in those sort of rookie seasons, not to craft an offense around his running ability. So I think it was always on his trajectory to have a situation like this where we finally put some names around him, finally give him a Zay Flowers. Yeah, I think we look back to last year, our highest yardage wide receiver last year, I think, was Demarcus Robinson with something like 560 yards. It's nonsense. These are the kind of guys that we were rolling out for him. He led the league in passing touchdowns with Miles Boykin and people like that around him. It's not, he didn't have a Devontae Adams. He didn't have an AJ Brown. He didn't have a Tyreek Hill. He hasn't got these guys around him that some of these other receivers that QBs that are taking a leap have got around them. So we've always known it's in there. I think the challenge has been looking at that depth chart at receiver. We haven't necessarily seen Bateman, OBJ, Flowers, Aguilar all on the field at the same time. We get spurts of OBJ. You get a kind of a big third down catch, and then he's sort of holding his hamstring and walking into the blue tent. Bateman hasn't really, I think, been in the right headspace. So you're sort of relying on Zay Flowers, and Nelson Aguilar suddenly becomes your two, and Devin Duvernay's getting rolled back out when really we'd like to keep him as a returner. And so it feels like we haven't seen everything that it could be. And I think what's been most surprising is the lack of usage of some of those tight ends outside of Mark Andrews. So I think after 4 weeks, I think we were something like 5th in the NFL in 3 wide receiver sets. And you compare that to Greg Roman, I mean, we probably would have been 31st or 32nd in that, because it would have been so many 11, 12, 22, all these kind of random personnels that we're bringing out, Pat Ricard, and we're bringing out 3 tight ends, and we're bringing out 2 running backs and whatever. So that feels like a real change. And it's disappointing because we have a lot of faith in Isaiah Likely. And so it's difficult not to see him out there. But so to come back to Lamar, none of this is a surprise to us because we've seen games. There's a comeback game against the Colts from the season before last where he threw for over 400 yards and just dominated that game through the air. So he's always been capable of doing it. Now this year feels like that point of, if we get a spread across the field of Bateman, OBJ, Flowers, and Mark Andrews, he can put it anywhere. He can put the ball anywhere and someone's going to be open. We just haven't yet. And I think part of that is scheming. Part of that is a bit of rustiness. But none of it's on Lamar. He, even in that Steelers game where the media narrative afterwards was, is he worth the contract? I think he was PFF's highest graded quarterback of the week, because it's just, if you add those drops in, he's suddenly 90% completion accuracy, 4 passing touchdowns, 290 yards or something. So, he has been unbelievable. I think I would still like to see slightly more designed running because of how effective it is. There are so many times you talk about that 3rd down efficiency and 4th down efficiency. There are so many times where you see us on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, and you sort of just assume that Lamar's getting this and keeping it. But instead we're trying stuff, and that's not a bad thing, but we're trying little screens to Zay Flowers, or we're trying little pitches out to Gus Edwards or whatever, and it's just not quite having the same effectiveness as the most dynamic player in the NFL holding the ball and trying to get 2 yards and almost always doing it. So I think it's still finding its feet, but all of the pitfalls, wherever they are in this offense, like I say, they are in no way on Lamar's shoulders outside of a couple of bad interceptions.
I did neglect to mention his rushing stats: 60 attempts, 327 yards, 4 touchdowns. So he is your leading rusher by 45 yards and by a touchdown over Justice Hill. It's quite interesting that Justice Hill has 150 yards over Gus Edwards' 282, but Justice has 3 touchdowns to Gus's 1. But I digress. We're going to move on to the defense now, and the statistical lead is inside linebacker Roquan Smith, the best in the NFL in my opinion. 4 passes defended, 1.5 sacks, 63 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, and a PFF grade of 89.3. Defensive tackle Justin Madueke is the leading sack leader, 4.5 sacks, 53 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 5 quarterback hits, PFF grade of 58.1. And Geno Stone has the most interceptions on the team with 3 passes defended, 26 tackles, PFF grade 86.4. And he's not really meant to be a starter on this team, so that's exceptional. Other good grades in there, Patrick Queen, 79.9, Rock Yassin, 76.4, Jadeveon Clowney, 77.5, and Carl Hamilton, 73.7. Worst grades in there, defensive end Robinson 54.1, and Washington, the defensive tackle, 45.8. In terms of efficiency, it's just a super solid team, especially when it comes to the red zone. On third down, 36 conversions allowed on 95 attempts, 37.9% is 13th. On fourth down, 3 of 7 is 11th, and in the red zone, they only allow 4 touchdowns in the red zone on 16 attempts. 25% is second in the NFL. And Ashley, I'm going to come straight back to you to talk about maybe the biggest change on the team, because obviously Roquan Smith is who we always thought he was, especially with the Bears, but Patrick Queen has flipped the switch. And I mean, I remember this offseason talking to Ian during the draft, and Patrick Queen was like number 1 on the rumoured trade candidates for basically the entire league. It was like, well, it's not quite worked out for him. The former first-round pick, maybe he'll find his feet elsewhere. And he's stayed, and he's been incredible.
Yeah, it's been a real revelation, and I think a lot of it has to be put to Roquan. I think the sort of the movement of Patrick Queen into this position of not having to be the guy. He doesn't have to be the catalyst every down. He doesn't have to be the person making every play. I think has freed him up to play with a lot more aggression and play with a lot more ambition, in the knowledge that he's got someone like Roquan backing him up. You know, if he goes right, he knows Roquan's going to go left. There's this sort of symbiotic relationship between them where they just work so beautifully together. This sort of tragic irony in the whole thing for us is that this is Patrick Queen's last year of his rookie deal. We didn't pick up the 5th-year option. We've paired him with Patrick Queen. The likelihood that we pay 2 inside linebackers big money, very slim. So I think we're all sort of resigned to him leaving in free agency, and hopefully we get a comp pick back in the 2025 draft. I think that's where we're sort of having to be. But from that perspective, we're just hoping that he continues to play at the elite level that he does, because then maybe a bit of a bidding war comes in for his services at the end of this year. So yeah, those two have been such a foundational piece here. And I think what we'd like to see as the season goes on, especially if we are resigning ourselves to losing Patrick, is to start to see slightly more of Trenton Simpson. I think that the expectation is he was drafted as the natural stick him alongside Roquan and he's going to be great piece, with that raw athleticism under the stewardship and mentorship of someone as elite as Roquan could turn into something special as well. So I think we'd like to see more usage of him. We still need, I think, as a defense, we still need to be getting more from the outside linebackers. Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney as free agent pickups late in the offseason have been brilliant. They've been absolutely fantastic in terms of getting pressure. And it seems like Clowney is starting to turn some of those pressures into sacks as well. But we've referenced Owe and Ajabo a few times already. Those are the guys who had the expectation of being those step up, being those real breakout candidates this year. Ajabo barely played last year because of the injury at his pro day. Owe has been on and off. He's had big games. You know, he had a really fantastic game against the Chiefs season before last, but has also had games where he's totally disappeared and just gets swallowed up by tackles. So I think we still need to see more from those outside linebackers, particularly because we know how effectively Roquan and Patrick are spreading things out. It's very difficult to get anything going up the middle because Roquan's always going to be there. The fascinating thing about being in London to watch the game against Tennessee last week is every time we were on defense, I was just drawn to number 0, just watching where he goes, watching where he moves. He sniffs things out before anybody else on the field. It's almost like he's got the headset for the play call. He knows where it's going, and gets there with such speed and aggression. It's frankly ridiculous. And so I think it's just making sure that those guys who on paper have all the attributes to really turn up and cause anyone problems can consistently start to do it. So I think we've got a huge amount of confidence in our defense, huge amount of confidence in the scheme that Mike Macdonald is using for them. And I think there's also a little bit of concern on our end that Mike Macdonald might be one of those sort of fancy head coach acquisitions sometime next season because of how effectively he's operating this defense. But yeah, I think we're just hoping that Patrick Queen can earn himself a massive contract, accept that it's somewhere else, but go with our best wishes following an unbelievable season this year. And that's really, I think, the best we can hope for, because like I say, the salary cap is not going to allow us to pay 2 inside linebackers, with Lamar's contract only getting bigger year on year.
And I know you're not the biggest fan of stats, but if I told you that they've not conceded more than 139 yards on the ground this season, and actually they've held teams to under 104 of them, and they've not conceded more than 216 passing yards in a game all season, it's a suffocating defense. What have you made of it this year?
Well, you just have to look at how they've built it and who they've built it with, and it doesn't really surprise me, whether it be from the college drafts or from players they've brought in. You've brought in Jadeveon Clowney from the Titans, and the Titans have just had a really good defense for a long time now. They don't play offense there, but they play a hard, brash style of defense. You bring in Roquan Smith from the Bears, and even though as much as I hate the Bears defense has been their signal calling card for years. They are hard hitting. They play well against the run. They bring a lot of pressure. It's a really good system. And then you look at where they're drafting guys from. You bring in Trenton Simpson from Clemson. Clemson's been an elite defense for years now. You bring in Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, another elite defense. You're bringing in guys from systems that have proven pedigree with proven players, and they play a certain way, and each and every one of them plays at 100% all the time in defenses that are multifunctional against the run, against the pass. They're just bred for this. And you look at all the players on there and there's a very clear identity that they've created, and it doesn't surprise me that the defense is so good, and it's got good depth to it, and it's just really difficult to get on top of them. And there are some good offenses who've struggled this year. You look at Burrow and the Bengals. I know Burrow's been hurt, but even then, they still struggled a bit, and they've got some great playmakers on that team. So it honestly does not surprise me this defense is doing so. As I say all the names, I see where they come from, and they are from specific defensive specialists and create great players, and you shouldn't expect any less from them. It's again, I'm a big fan of the way they've built this team. I love it. So we're going to have to be at our very best to get something against it. But again, I know what our offense can do. So that's why I feel more confident without disrespecting them.
Actually, I'm just going to ask you quickly before we talk about the Tennessee game, just what thoughts you have potentially about the Lions. We're going to come up to the specific matchups in just a minute, but have you seen much of us this year? What have you made of what we've done?
I'm an enormous fan of what's been happening in Detroit. I think it's I was watching the Bucs game last week, and no single play has got me as excited, I think, this season than that Craig Reynolds block for the Amon-Ra touchdown. Partially because of how exceptional it was, and also partially because I have a lot of Amon-Ra fantasy stakes. So it was sort of double bubble for me to see that one. But I think that that is sort of indicative of the kind of ethos that I ascribe to the Lions. It's that willingness to make that play. That's not a sexy play. That's not an enjoyable play. That will have hurt. That won't have been much fun. But if he didn't make it, it's suddenly, it's a 5-yard gain as opposed to a 20-yard gain and a touchdown. So making that block, sitting that guy on his backside to let Amon-Ra just skip in home is what I think this team is all about. And that's the mentality that I get from Dan Campbell. Is it's almost that sort of, if I can equate it to an English soccer reference, it's almost kind of like a Colin Warnock, us against the world, siege mentality thing of everyone hates us, everyone wants to beat us, no one really likes us and what we're about, but we don't care. We're just going to go in and try and smash them up anyway. The sort of, I can't call it the emergence, but the emergence of David Montgomery in this offense has been really exciting to see. I didn't think I'd be in a position where I'm saying I'm really glad he's out for the game against us. That's something I didn't have on my bingo card at the start of this season when he moved to you. But actually, he's been fantastic. And those receiving options in Amon-Ra, Jameson now coming back, Sam Laporta, there's a lot to like there. And I think as much as we go through those stats for our defense, it does have to come with the caveat of it was against a rookie quarterback in his first week, Joe Burrow with a bit of whatever going on, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Gardner Minshew, and then a stuttering Steelers offense, and then Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis last week. So this is by a country mile our biggest test as a defense. And it may well be that the same is true as a test for your offense. This defense is the sort of best that perhaps you've come up against. So it's a really intriguing battle. But what I think I love so much about where the Lions are is that it feels like it's built in the right way. It feels like it's that proper approach of we're going to build from the lines and we're going to make sure we win in the trenches, and then we're going to start adding stuff around that. I don't think it's a surprise that both offensive and defensive lines for the Lions are up there among the very best in the league. And that's no coincidence for why Jared Goff is suddenly putting up really impressive numbers, because actually, if you're not getting pressured as much, if you're getting more time, if you're getting more space, you can make better decisions. He's never been a bad quarterback. But if you play behind leaky offensive lines, then you're going to be under pressure regardless. And similarly on the defensive line, I mean, I feel like you got a stroke of luck from Jacksonville when they took Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. But, I'm sure the stories of the Lions front office sprinting that card in to get Aiden Hutchinson are true, because he should have been the number 1 overall pick, both on the day and how things have turned out since then. So I think it's a really intriguing battle, particularly with how our offensive line has looked, the left side of it in particular. I mean, you mentioned John Simpson and Ronnie Stanley. Ronnie Stanley has looked like a bit of a shell of himself since coming back from injury. We don't know whether it's physical. We don't know if it's mental. Maybe it's a combination of both. But him and John Simpson on that left side of the line are giving up the vast majority of our pressures and the vast majority of our sacks. Everything from Tyler Linderbaum out to Moga Moses is looking really solid. Tyler Linderbaum is exceptional. He's one of the best centers in the league. He hasn't given up a hit or a sack this season. So everything on that right side is playing exceptionally well. The left side really concerns me, because that's the side that Pittsburgh really exploited in Ronnie's first game back. That's the side that even Tennessee was starting to get a bit of success against. So the prospect of Aiden Hutchinson coming at Ronnie Stanley and John Simpson fills me with a bit of dread. So I think there's just an enormous amount of really interesting tactical matchups across the whole field. The coverage that we can get from that secondary is exceptional, but I don't think we've necessarily played offenses that are multifaceted as people like a Williams and a St. Brown and a Laporta. So how effectively can we cover all of those guys? The answer is probably not completely. So there will be some gains to be made, but it's that old bend don't break kind of mentality that I think we need to lean into. If we can just do enough to force it to field goals rather than touchdowns, then I think we can have a lot of success. But this feels like one of those pivotal moments in the season for both teams, where afterwards, partially on result, but I think mostly on performance, we'll come out and know an awful lot more about both of our teams and the pathways that we're actually on as we head through to the rest of the season and hopefully beyond.
We're just going to talk about this Tennessee game in this case, and I'll split it out into offense, defense, and special teams, which just makes it a bit easier. And on offense, very productive first drive and a half, maybe 2 drives to start the game, and then coming out into the third quarter and one maybe good drive in there as well. Lots of screenplay, which I kind of didn't really expect from you, especially early. There was lots of pressure up front from Tennessee, and you really tried to throw a lot of wide receiver and running back screens at them, which I thought was really interesting. And there's one big gainer which came out of that, which, almost went for a touchdown without one kind of last-ditch tackle at midfield. But what I really want to talk to you about, I alluded to play calling earlier, and it's this. You had so many trips to their red zone, and every time you got within their 25 to 20, you went from Lamar passing the ball to like run, pass, or run, quarterback run, and it just kind of didn't work in the condensed area of the field. And I'm like, surely they can't do it again. And then one time they did kind of change it up with a play action pass. And I was like, oh, you're going to get Lamar out in space with ball in hand where he can run or pass. This is much better than doing a designed run that you've been doing before when they can see it coming a mile away. There are a couple of third down efforts he had where it's third down and 1 or 2 and it was a quarterback designed run which didn't work. I think one time he stumbled, but the rest of them, they were just lying in wait for him. And I was like,
yeah,
try something else, please, God. I don't know whether that's been a feature of the rest of your season. I have to admit I've only seen this one in detail. Is that something that's happening all season?
No, it was a bit of an outlier, to be honest. The red zone efficiency across the rest of the season has been pretty good. Steelers game notwithstanding again with the drops, but those first 4 weeks we were pretty ruthless in turning things into 7. So it did feel like one of those days that things were just not working. And I don't know if it's a bit of overthinking from Monken or if it's maybe just Lamar taking the wheel and saying, actually, no, this is my ball, I'm keeping it. That sort of hubris, which is perfectly well deserved given how effectively he has been able to do it in the past. So it did feel like a bit of a bad day at the office from midway in the second quarter onwards last weekend. So I think the hope is that we can shake it off and we can move on. I think that there has been some reference in a lot of Lamar's press conferences over the last week or so about the fact that we have started hot in pretty much every game. The sort of the game script for a lot of our games has been either up by quite a lot by half time or decent amount of points and decent amount of yards on the board by half time. Second halves for most of these games have been pretty laborious. And I think Lamar has referenced in a couple of these interviews the fact that defenses are changing their scheme in the second half. They're seeing what we're doing, they're adjusting, and we are not doing the same. We're sort of coming out in some of these second halves and saying, well, this worked in the first half, so we'll assume you haven't changed anything and keep running it. And so we're therefore just running straight into brick walls as we run into a defense that's suddenly expecting the things that were working so well in the first half. So I think there's still a lot of learning that needs to go on for Todd Monken, which sounds really disparaging given his level of experience both at college and NFL levels. But I think there's still some development of his scheme to come out, both within games but also across the season. What we are seeing is every week we're seeing new concepts being put into the same formations. So there's clearly a concerted effort from Todd Monken to show a look, have a defense think it's one thing, and then bring in a new play that we've not run before this season to throw them off, which is great. But I think it's a lot of those plays that are the ones that seem like they're laying an egg. It's those ones that maybe we've only really practiced for the last week. Maybe it's a brand new one that people are just getting familiar with. So I think there's an element of he's trying to keep some things in reserve in the hopes of there being a long playoff run and we can bring something completely wild and crazy out for the AFC Championship game or whatever. But yeah, it's those kind of things that are sometimes tripping us up. So even 6 weeks in, I think that's what we mean when we say there are still these little rusty moments of this looks like a new offense. But I think looking back to last weekend, we're optimistically viewing that as an outlier, and red zone efficiency hopefully will regress more towards the mean in a positive direction for us this season. But we'll see.
Looking at the defense, I mean, what can you say about them? Lots of pressure all the way through the game on especially the running game. It was just suffocating at times, and you had Derek Henry being hit behind the line the majority of the time, it seems like. Humphreys got pinged for DPI twice early, and it looked really harsh both times. Brandon Stevens had a great pass breakup in the end zone. It was basically Tennessee's biggest chance to get back in the game early on. There was also a big run by Derek Henry early on where they went jumbo set with 6 offensive linemen, and the offensive lineman covered up the tight end. And it's like, this wasn't even affecting the play, so what are you doing? So, got away with that one a little bit. But you guys at the line, they all got their hands up all in unison at the same time. It's really well drilled to bat balls down, and at times over Goff's Detroit career, that's been a problem for him, although not this season so far. Marcus Williams had a great pass breakup. Patrick Queen had 2 blitzes that were really impressive on 2nd and 3rd down, ended with a 3rd down sack where he just managed to get in between the centre and the guard, which was super impressive to watch him do. But I do think he was the one who was at fault for the Derek Henry big game where he came out of Wildcat and he bought the reverse instead of just following his gap for the Henry gain. Hamilton and obviously had the brutal hit. Geno Stone, his interception was fantastic. I mean, it's just a terrible throw by Tannehill, but moonballs it a little bit, and the technique to actually turn back for it was really, really good. And then Willis, when he comes in, it's a different kettle of fish to have to try and defend, so you've got to make some adjustments, and I thought he did that really nicely. Scramble drills, I mean, Willis was dancing about all around, and you just kind of kept him in the pocket for the most part, or didn't leave him much if he did get outside, so that was really good. And on special teams, Duvernay, I mean, should have had a touchdown. I mean, why can't you outrun a punter, man? Come on. And then you had a PAT blocked after a 2-point try was negated by OPI, but otherwise Tucker went for 6 for 6 on field goals. So all around a great performance. And I'll come back to you. The defense for the Ravens was much the better part of what happened last Sunday. And I mean, they kept Tennessee to the most part to nothing until the game was basically done.
Yeah, that Tennessee offense is just atrocious. But at the same time, they shut down Derrick Henry. Not many teams couldn't do that. And it's very impressive. Again, not much you can say about all these teams they've come up against this year. They've strangled them for the most part. I mean, what's the highest score they've had? Is it 24?
20.
What the Bengals put on them?
Yeah.
And like 24 points over 6 games, if that's the most you give up over 6 weeks in an NFL season, you're going to be 4-2. Like that's the platform for you there. I mean, this time, obviously, you're coming up against an offense that's only gone below 24 twice. We can score, but I mean, yeah, it just looks suffocating and it looks so good. And again, I'm just really not surprised with the amount of talent that's on there. So it's going to be incredibly difficult for us. So yeah. Another thing I will say though, there is one thing here. I think you're one of the most penalised teams in the league. Is it about over 40 so far this year? Is there a problem there? Is there a specific area? Because we all know penalty, we all hate refs, and we all know where the penalties come from. How come there's been so many for you this year?
Yeah, I think it's just it's clearly an NFL conspiracy against the Ravens. I mean, it's been so.
Hey, that's our excuse.
So egregiously bad. No, sorry. Oh, okay. No, I mean, you referenced some of the ones against the Titans there. They were just baffling, and that one big Derrick Henry run that came, the reason that leaves such a sour taste is that that run came straight after that horrendous DPI. So, that should never have happened, because that should have been they're punting and off we go. And what I will say is actually Ryan Stonehouse, the punter of the Titans, does have 85 speed on Madden. So no shame in getting caught by him and Devin Duvernay. Yes, it should have been a touchdown, but
Did
that's
you go
probably
back
the
and check
fastest
that,
punter
or
in
did
the
you
league.
already know that?
I saw it on Twitter. No, I saw it on Twitter. So he is the fastest punter in the league. So if you're going to get caught by anybody, you're going to get caught by him. And the other thing I would say is that 7 of those 24 that the Bengals put on us were a punt return as well. So it's it's even fewer that the actual defense is letting up. So I think it kind of comes back to what we were saying with Kyle Hamilton. I think this defense is predicated on that old ethos of play like a Raven. It's about hitting hard. It's about being there, hitting it 100 miles an hour, being aggressive. And I think there's a feeling of we'd rather you tried to make the play and gave it up than try to just hang around and be conservative and not give up too many yards and end up, just sort of helping them move down the field anyway. I think when we had Marcus Peters a couple of years ago, he was sort of prototypical for that in terms of he was jumping on routes left, right, and center. And sometimes he gets absolutely burned behind because he's missed it completely. But other times he's picking it off and taking it back for 6. And you kind of think he's doing the latter enough to justify the former. And I think there's something in we're hitting teams hard enough and we're playing hard enough and we're playing rough that you accept those calls and you say some of them are good, some of them are bad, but we'd rather we were being physical. We'd rather we were playing receivers as opposed to just saying, I don't want to touch you because there might be a flag. And actually, by not touching you, I'm pretty much guaranteed to give you 15, 20 yards on this, as opposed to, no, I'm going to put my hands on you and we're going to bump and we're going to rub shoulders. And if I get a flag, I get a flag. But actually, it's now suddenly a 50-50 ball and I fancy my chances. So I think it's something to do with that. I think that's Mike Macdonald's philosophy. He wants his defense to play hard. He wants to bring different looks and interesting looks. The pressures and the sacks, they're not just stacked with the outside linebackers. The pressures and sacks are coming from Kyle Hamilton. They're coming from cornerbacks. We've got players right across the defense that are being schemed open with stunts and blitzes to cause pressure. So I think that will be another challenge for Goff, in that, every defense clearly shows things and then bails out. But I think it's really just this feeling that you never fully know who's coming at you until they're coming at you, and they will come at you at full speed, which was another of the particularly disgusting calls last weekend on a roughing the passer, which it was just the worst roughing the passer I've seen in a really, really long time, given that I think the ball was barely out of Tannehill's hands when Clowney was on top of him. So, I think it is just one of those things where the coaches are working in a space where they say, we'd rather you were playing at 100% and picking up a few flags than hedging your bets, playing at 90% and giving up yards, giving up touchdowns. So I think it will come in time, and I think some of that discipline, if we can call it that, will start to even itself out in time when a lot of these players really find their feet and get comfortable with each other. So not massively worried about it, but some of them are just gross. But I'm conscious that every team will have calls against them every single week that are just disgusting. So it isn't a conspiracy for anyone from the NFL that's listening. I'm aware it's not.
You're playing us, so you're due favourable calls. So
It'll just be. It's just going to be flags on every play for each of us. It's just every play is going to have a yellow flag down.
If you come out a game with us feeling egregious at the refs, then I sympathise. It just doesn't happen.
It's going to be raining flags like it wasn't the Kyle Hamilton play. I swear, like 4 or 5 came in for that. It was like, they say that we saw it, we've got it.
And they say we've got the most flag-happy crew in the NFL this weekend as well.
Terrific.
I can't remember who it is, but I'm pretty sure we've got the most flag-happy crew. So this sets up for us really well.
Oh, please say it's not
Just don't touch it. It's not cleat. No,
No,
no. If
thank
it was
God.
cleat,
I
it
mean,
was cleat,
I will take the most flag-happy team over Cleat Blakeman. I mean, he's probably got the nicest voice of all of the referees because he speaks clearly, but his words are poison. Anyway, moving on finally to the key matchups before keys to victory and score prediction. And if you're on the live chat, once we finish the audio pod, we are going to be taking a few questions. We've got a couple already, so if you've got any questions for us, just remember to @ the channel and we'll get to them in just a moment. Key matchups. So we've talked about a lot of this already, but just to make it quite succinct at the end here, Ravens' run game against the Lions' run D. You know, there's obviously Lamar's the leading rusher, but Gus Edwards has looked pretty tidy. I did say 2 good tackles, but we've said that Stanley is perhaps not one of those. But Morgan Moses has been great, and a great centre as well in there. Simpson, we mentioned, perhaps is the weak point, and this is a Lions defense who, I mean, it's not a franchise-leading record yet, I don't think, but 6 consecutive games of less than 100 yards against on the ground. So trying to pick who's got the advantage here is pretty tough because we've faced some fairly good rushing teams as well. It's not like we've had a layup here, although I wouldn't say that it was against the best rushing teams either. So, Ant, I'll come to you first. Who's got the advantage in this matchup?
See, the thing is, I don't know, simply because you're right. We have come up against some good running back punches like Algier and Bijan. We've come up and we've flattened the pair of them, but the way the Ravens run their run game is so much different to everybody else, and we've not faced that this year. Guys who can get to the perimeter like really quick, a lot of speed, a lot of misdirection, and you're not just including the guys on the back. Like I said, you've got Zay Flowers, you've got guys like this, and we've not come up against it, and traditionally we've struggled against it. It's one of the questions we've still got to answer. Can we combat it? Yes, theoretically, but I think our biggest matchup for us, it's our linebackers. There's going to be a lot put on our linebackers for this one. One, against that trio of tight ends who are all very dangerous pass catchers, and 2, the likes of Barnes, the likes of Campbell, who we've bought in to help deal and get to the perimeter and stop the run game on the edge. And that's where it really lies with this one. And from Barnes, we've seen he's having a year 3 renaissance. He's having his best career by far. He's the absolute perfect weapon to send in at this one. And Campbell's growing into his role. Campbell, surprisingly, has been great in run defense, whereas it wasn't his modus operandi coming out of college necessarily. It was the coverage that everybody loved. But these 2 guys stepping up against the run gives our line so much more. The edge guys are protecting they are protecting the edge better. They're sealing them up. So we've got the weapons to go against it. But how are we going to react? Because it's one thing having the guys, it's 2, can they do it? And I've just not seen us against this type of team this year. So they're at home. They're very drilled in what they do. So you've got to figure it's going to be a very tough day for us with it. And they might have the advantage in this matchup here. But we do have the guys to counteract it. And at the minute, Glenn's the hottest DC in the league who's calling great games. So I would trust him to be able to try and come up with something against this. So I think it'll be close. But certainly, on what you've seen so far, the Ravens have the advantage here. But I do fancy us to be able to have a good shot at stopping it.
Ashley, do you agree?
I think I do. I think that the most intriguing thing for me this week is going to be if we see some of Keaton Mitchell. So Keaton Mitchell was our preseason darling. He was the guy who looks like he runs at 100 miles an hour, who seemed always to be open in space. And therefore we thought, we've got a guy here. We've got an unbelievable undrafted free agent here who's going to do amazing things for us. He had an injury at the end of preseason. I think he's been that sort of IR with a broken fingernail kind of stash because we just assumed if he's on practice squad, someone's signing him. So we've clearly waited until the point that we think we're ready to do something with him, to sort of designate him to return. It would be really interesting to see if he's there as an actual part of this running attack, or if he's like he was last week, pretty much a core special teamer gunning down to to chase down kick returners and that sort of thing. So I think that would be really interesting. Overall, I think we as a team are defined by the run game. With John Harbaugh as a head coach, you're always going to run the ball. That's always going to be part of the philosophy. And with Lamar Jackson as a quarterback, you always have that option of, read options and all of those sorts of weird and wacky run plays that we can do that pretty much no one else can, because you're suddenly in a space where, well, Gus Edwards might go right and Lamar might go left, and you need to pick one, and you've got a quarter of a second to pick one. If you pick wrong, one or the other is going for 6 or 7 yards. So I think if we can get that working effectively, Gus Edwards so far this season has not been anywhere near as efficient as he normally is. I think there's this particularly funny stat of the all-time highest yards per carry for running backs with over 500 yards. The top 3 are sort of Nick Chubb and 2 Hall of Fame running backs, and number 4 is Gus Edwards. And so it's not in that category of a Hall of Fame running back, but he is ruthlessly efficient. This year, I think he's at something like 2.9 yards per carry or something like that. It's pretty low by his standards. Justice Hill, as more of a speed guy, is seeing a lot more space, is seeing a lot more open grass to run into. And I think Munkin's doing a good job at scheming him open. What we particularly like there is the way that the offensive line moves to accommodate that. I think when we drafted Tyler Linderbaum, it always felt as though he would be wasted in a pretty static power run game. But if you can get Tyler Linderbaum moving to the second level, you can get him out wide into more of a sort of zone scheme. He can do unbelievable things because he's incredibly mobile, reads the game incredibly well, and creates gaps that otherwise wouldn't be there. So I think we're moving towards that kind of thing. The speed of Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, if he's activated, could be a real threat. But that matchup of Ronnie Stanley versus Aiden Hutchinson really worries me, because that could shut things down very quickly if those spaces are just not there. So if Ronnie Stanley is okay and does a reasonable job, I think we can have some running success. If Ronnie Stanley looks the way that he did against Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, and you have to put Aiden Hutchinson in that kind of ballpark, we're going to struggle. And we're going to have to divert to a strategy of, well, we're just running right then, because we've got no joy running left. So it limits us if Ronnie Stanley is not at his absolute best. So in a vacuum, yeah, I think we can do some work rushing the ball, because we always will and we always can. But it's not impossible to get the stops.
I'm going to make two comments. One is Gus Edwards is 3.9 yards a carry, so nowhere near as bad as he thought. And I mean, when you consider that Tampa Bay is 3 yards a carry for their team, it could be worse. The other thing is, I do not think, unless we change what we do significantly, you'll see a lot of Hutch over left tackle. I think our own Ashley was breaking it down last week, because we were speculating about whether he would go up against the Tampa Bay left tackle. And apparently, so far this season, and for the majority of his career, he's playing 50% of his snaps over right tackle, 30% on the interior, and 20% over left tackle. So you'll see a bit of it, but the majority of the time he'll actually be up against Charles Harris, Romeo Okwara, Josh Pascal if he comes back, John Kaminsky, these type of guys. And I do think that is potentially a more even matchup. Hutch against Morgan Moses, therefore, is really interesting, because Moses has had a really good year, but Hutch is still Aiden Hutchinson, and he had a down game last week, but 1 out of 6. So we'll see how that works out. Let's talk about the other side of the Ravens offense and their passing game, which we've talked about, and Lamar has come on. I say come on, he's always been there, but it's kind of happening a bit more perhaps, and he's been more ably supported against the Lions coverage. And I mean, no one, and back me up here, we hoped, but we didn't predict that the Lions coverage unit would be anywhere near as good as it has been this year. And we have faced some interesting passing offenses. I mean, the Bucks have a great duo of wide receivers, and Baker had them humming for a while. And the Seahawks are obviously really efficient with Geno, and we play the Chiefs in week 1, so we've played our share of good passing offenses with multiple weapons on those teams. I mean, Seattle's trio of wide receivers might be the best in the NFL, and the duo at Tampa Bay might be the best duo in the NFL as a 2 versus 3, whatever. So what do you think about this matchup in particular? Because this might be the one with Branch coming back where people have been saying we need to limit them to being one-dimensional to get somewhere in this game. But I'm wondering whether the limit of what we want to do is actually to shut them down in the passing game rather than the run, which I think would go against what a lot of people are talking about.
Well, they just shut them down in both, like we did with Tampa and Atlanta. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel a lot better about... The big thing about our pass defense is for the first time since Darius Slay, we have a cornerback 1 now. Like a good cornerback 1 who we can put on their best and feel reasonably confident is going to have a really good day in Cam Sutton. That makes things so much easier for the rest of your secondary when you've got that guy who will lead there. And then, we've got young guys who are balling out. Branch has been one of the, he's a defensive rookie of the year candidate already. Kirby's had his licks, but he's doing well. Jerry is on a career renaissance at the minute. 3 picks in his last 3 games, performing really well in coverage. The trouble with this Ravens team is I don't think it necessarily comes down to coverage. It's can you match the motion? They can scheme guys open. It's not just whether you're good in coverage, it's can you stick with them? Can you figure out the plays? Can you figure out the game plan? So that's where the issues come with this. And the teams who have sort of had a little bit more success against them are the guys who've been able to figure it out a little bit better, those defenses, which are quite good. So the linebackers worry me more. The linebackers have not been uber good, apart from Alex. The linebackers have been a little bit more spotty in coverage this year, and they've got really good tight ends. That will concern me more than their receivers on our secondary guys. For the first time in forever, I feel good about our passing defense. If you can come up against the test against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and limit them to 6 points, even though we gave up a few big plays, but who cares? I feel relatively confident against anybody else in the league at this point, especially if Branch is back. He's the exact perfect guy for a game like this.
Yeah, actually, my worry has to be Mark Andrews generally, because we've just struggled facing that type of tight end.
Not just him, it's the 3 of them. Like, Likely's huge. He's 6'6", pass catcher. Kohler, 6'5", I think he is, pass catcher. All 3 of them I worry about against our lot. This is where Campbell will come in big in this. I think Campbell's coverage skills and his size and his build will be absolutely critical for us in this one.
Actually, what do you think of this? I'm just thinking back to the London game, and Mark Andrews caught a ball up the seam, but he faked an in-breaking route and then just kept going, and he had the safety just all at sea. So that's the sort of thing I'm fearing, especially from someone like Jack Campbell, who is a complete rookie and has looked at times sometimes in coverage. So a little shake and bake from Andrews could have us struggling, perhaps.
I think it's that there was a lot of conversation during our off season when we drafted Zay, signed OBJ, added Nelson Aguilar, suddenly got to a point where it looked like we had receivers. There was a bit of conversation among the fan base of, what does this mean for Mark Andrews? And the answer, as it's turned out over the last 6 weeks, is not a huge amount, really, because he's always going to continue to get his. He's always going to be there. That seemingly telepathic relationship between him and Lamar still exists. I think there's just something, when a play breaks down, 89 is always the number that Lamar will look for first, because he's his guy that he knows is going to be somewhere sat in a pocket of space. He knows he can just throw it high and he can pretty much go up against anyone for a grab. So I think it probably will be a pretty Mark Andrews heavy offensive plan. But I think what we've seen, which is simultaneously exciting and concerning, is that over the last 6 weeks, there have been really clear intentions on certain plays to force the ball to individual receivers. There have clearly been play calls that have the sole purpose of, let's get the ball to OBJ. Doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing. He's your one and only read. Similarly with Zay, we've tried infinite different ways of giving him the ball 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, getting him on slants, getting him on quick outs, all of these sorts of things to just get the ball to him to see what he can do with it once he's got it. So I think if we can limit those kind of plays, give Lamar more freedom to just read what's on offer and take the best available read, which may be Mark Andrews in the majority of cases, then I think we can have some success. I think it comes back to that earlier conversation of probably a bit of overthinking and a bit of overcomplicating and a bit of over planning for some of these things, as opposed to just got some really good weapons. Let's try and make the most of those guys in space. But I think overall we're still just waiting for that one breakout passing game performance. I think we could have had it in week 5 against the Steelers. If the receivers could actually have catched, that might have been the one we'd look back on and go, wow, that was a dominant receiver performance. But we're still waiting for that one game where it looks like it's clicked. And with each passing week, we look to the next one and go, maybe it's this week. So I'll continue that trend and say, well, maybe it's this week. You know, maybe we actually see a run of snaps where we do have Zay, Bateman, OBJ, Mark Andrews all lining up together, and it puts a defense in a bit of a blender, because you've suddenly got multiple guys that are actually worth covering, that all need covering. I think historically our problem has been, well, you double cover Mark Andrews and you're pretty happy that you can get the ball against Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Demarcus Robinson, and Sammy Watkins. You're not worried about those guys. So I think we're just hoping we can get to that point where the receivers actually start to demand the respect on the field that their names imply they should have. So if that works and it all clicks, I think we become quite a concerning double-headed monster of a run game with Lamar involved and a passing game with Lamar involved that really allows us to flex in multiple different ways. If it doesn't pan out and either of the receivers lay an egg again, or maybe Lamar's not seeing it quite as effectively, it could be a pretty long day. So I'm hopeful, and I think Mark Andrews will have a big day, both box score and fantasy and all those sorts of things. But I hope we're not at a point where we're saying it's Andrews or bust. I think if that's where we're at, that would be reminiscent of last year and the year before and seasons gone by, you know, memories that we really want to forget. So hopefully we can still spread it around and only need to lean on Mark Andrews in those kind of big 3rd and 7s where you just need something, need a play, so I'm going to hit my guy. And if we can get into that space, then I think we can have some success.
Coming over to the Lions' offensive side of the ball, the run game versus the Ravens' run defense. Ravens shut down the run very effectively with Clowney and Madubuike and Pierce and Queen and Smith. And yet the Lions have run the ball pretty effectively for the majority of their games last week, accepted, where had to win a different way, and they did. But with no David Montgomery almost confirmed out for this game, and maybe, you know, the next 4 or 5, it could be at the worst point. Looks like Jahmyr Gibbs is coming back. Looks like Craig Reynolds is going to be a go after missing practice on Wednesday. He was back in a limited fashion today. I'll come back to Ashley this time and then go to Ant. Your run defense is great, but you're coming up against one of the better O-lines in football. Are you confident that you can shut us down on this facet?
Yes. It's a feeling that we can. So in isolation, yes, we can. I think where I need to be more hesitant is that what I don't think we've had is a team playing against us where they've got that combination of an O-line that can stop you stuffing the run and some offensive playmakers as receivers that actually warrant you dropping back into coverage and being mindful of that pass coming over the top. So I think when we're playing against, we've played against teams like last week, Derrick Henry, you know that everything goes through him. So you're not as worried about a pass over the top to a Chris Moore or a Chig Okonkwo, slightly worried about D-Hop. But outside of that, you're not as worried. You're thinking primary read is the handoff to Derek Henry. And if we can shut that down, we're probably having a good day. This is a totally different kettle of fish in that actually you seem equally effective letting Goff stand there and pick out a pass as you are handing it off to, would have been Montgomery, but Jameer Gibbs and Craig Reynolds coming in behind. So I think we have to show a lot more respect to the fact that we can get beat over the top if we're throwing everything to shove everyone in the box. So I think we can, because I mentioned earlier on about Roquan's ability to read the game and stop things before they happen. So I think as soon as he sniffs a handoff, he's going to be on it. And that combination of Queen and Roquan will be there to limit gains. But I don't think we're going to see as many tackles for loss as we did last week against the Titans, when you're going into a game plan thinking it's probably going to be 70% likelihood it's a run anyway. So we'll just bank on that. So I think that's more concerning for me, that we may come up short if we start betting the house to stop the run. So it's, like I say, in a vacuum, yes, we can stop it. If we do, and we absolutely sell the farm to do so, there's going to be some joy elsewhere. So we need to be really careful.
And I think some casual observers might look at this game and go, well, we played a really good run defense last week, and yeah, they shut us down, but we found a different way to win, and they're not too dissimilar. And yet, the Bucks kind of generate a lot of their pressure through run blitzes and all this sort of stuff. They're bringing extra guys to do it, whereas the Ravens seem to manage it without bringing extra pressure. They're just really good at blocking all the holes up. So do you think that we can get some joy on this side of the ball?
I'm going to be brutally honest with you here. I don't want us to have anything to do with the run game in this. I don't want to be running at that interior in the slightest. Why? Because you're playing right into their hands. What do Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith do best? They defend against the run. As has been said, they're very intellectual. They can pick up on it quick, and they've got a lot of big, beefy guys on the middle designed to stop you running on them. And for as much I love our O-line, even if Monty was playing in this one, I think you are playing into their hands by trying to run it down their gut. You're going to put yourself in 3rd and long, and that's where the picks come from. And they have a lot of ball hawks in that secondary who are just waiting to pick you off when they send the pressure in on a quarterback and they make him panic. I think it's the Colts, the only team who have a 100-yard rusher on them this year. And even then it was at 4 yards a carry. It wasn't earth-shatteringly good. And I think it was a couple of just big runs. Like Derek Henry, he had one big run last week, which whiffed his stats and make it look better than it was. For me, this is why we drafted Jameer Gibbs and Jameson Williams, to win games when we can't just run it down somebody's throat. Because sometimes you can't win that way. Jameer Gibbs, we don't just run him down the A-gaps. We don't just push him down there. He has the skill, the athleticism to get into space on the outside, to attack the perimeter, and to make plays there. Jameson Williams, the second Goff connected with him last week, that Tampa defense dropped 5 yards. No longer did they stack the box. That's all they were doing to start the game. They were stacking the box against us. That's why we had no success with the run whatsoever. The second they realized and had to respect the deep threat from JMO, it puts them back a few yards. And that's when you can start hitting against the run defense. That's when these guys have to take a few back. And you hit them in coverage instead. And that's why we've drafted these guys, to win these sort of games. So I don't want to run the ball. I want to throw it to JMO. I want to get Jameer in space on screens, attack them on the edge where they're weaker, because those safeties, those corners, they're not as good at defending the run. They rely entirely on that front seven. Get behind them, you make yourself chances. So, no, I don't want to run the ball on them. I want to use my utility guys. I want to use my lockpick guys like Zay Flowers and basically work their own magic on them, because I ain't going down the middle against this team. Not a chance.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you've got to kind of keep them honest. otherwise,
But you got to do it with the pass first. You can't just keep them honest by just running it at them to begin with. You got to do it the opposite way around this time. You got to keep them honest by passing early and making them think, oh, hang on, actually, we can't stack the box against them. And then you open up the run game for yourself. That's the way you've got to do it this week. And we've got the guys to be able to do it. And we've got the linemen who are athletic enough and gifted enough to get out on screens and do it that way. Ben Johnson's a smart guy. He'll see this. He'll see that running through the middle is a bit of a minefield here, and he will scheme for it.
And then finally, talking about the Lions' passing offense versus the Ravens' pass defense. And I mean, I said early on that, you know, they've not conceded 250 yards in the air this season to anyone. And Ashley has adequately highlighted that perhaps they've not been facing the best of passing offenses, or at least there's been one-dimensional offenses they've been able to play quite nicely. But it seems to match up quite well with us, I would say, in terms of, you know, yes, we've got Sam Laporte, who's a little banged up right now, but I'm sure he's going to be fine to go. But if he's going over the middle, he's going to be facing that inside linebacker group that we've spoken so highly of. And then you have a look at those outside receivers of ours, like JMO and like Josh Reynolds, who, frankly, Josh Reynolds, for me, has been the best wide receiver we've had all season. And that's something to say when we've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Josh Reynolds has been exceptional, and we've still got Khalif back there. But, you know, you've had Brandon Stevens and Marlon Humphrey and Rock Ya-Sin, who pass breakup machines out there who've been really good in coverage. So, and I will just say right now, you're not covering Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not even going to talk about that. But the outside guys, it's a really interesting matchup again. You know, a potentially quite even matchup.
See, this is really going to be my first part of homerism on this pod, and Ashley, do forgive me, but Jared Goff is a top 5 quarterback in this league right now, playing some of the best football of his life, and my receivers, I have absolute 100% trust in to go up against anybody. I know there's big names in there. I love Hamilton. I respect what Marcus Williams has done his entire career, but our receivers are playing on another level at the minute. And you've got so many different ways you can hurt them. You can hit them over the middle with Amon-Ra. You can hit them deep with JMO. We've got faux deep threats in Reynolds. We've not even seen Raymond recently. He's not been part of the game plan. You've got to scheme for him as well. You've got speed to do so many different things. And the way Goff is playing, because Goff took the game on his back last week against a very good defense, who we were also speaking very highly of in the run-up to that, who have domineering linebackers, who have guys in the secondary who can hurt you. And he took the game over. And I just think now he's playing at such a level that I don't worry about who we're going up against. I trust him. I trust the receivers to do well. So I think this will be another game where he gets big figures. I think JMO will figure in a lot to an Amon-Ra, we've said. It doesn't even feel like he tries for 100-yard games anymore. That's just the vein of form he's in. So I fully trust our passing offense in this one, just because they're all playing at the top of the game right now. There's no fear in them, and they will go out there and they'll believe that they can do it. And again, with the way this Ravens defense sets up against the run, I think early there's going to be space and opportunities for them, and Goff will have the time to hit them. So forgive me my little bit of homerism there, but I love this part of our team at the minute, and I back it against anybody.
Actually, what do you make of it?
Well, I'm still reeling from the Jared Goff top 5 comment, clearly, but I think it's not as ridiculous as it would have been in previous seasons. You know, he is playing out of his skin. There's a reason why he's PFF's highest graded quarterback of so far. You know, he is playing unbelievably well. So I think we have to respect it. I think looking at today's practice report, Marcus Williams didn't practice again today. Seems as though there's a bit of a thigh issue coming from the Tennessee game. So that, coupled with the fact that he's pretty much playing with one arm following an injury in the Texans game week 1. Yeah, there are situations, I think, last week where you're seeing a nailed-on pick if he goes for the ball with 2 hands, but he's only going with his right arm because his left is sort of just hanging there limp next to him, so he's just breaking the pass up. Still a great play, but you can see that he's not 100%. So it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see Marcus Williams. And that drops the standard of pass coverage pretty significantly. Geno Stone has done a brilliant job. He has been getting picks. He has been playing really well in coverage. But Marcus Williams, he is not. So it allows more opportunities, I think. Marlon Humphrey feels like he's getting better and better, getting back to himself. Steelers, my personal view is that he came back too early. I think he came back because it was the Steelers rather than he came back because he was ready. I think the same is true of Ronnie Stanley on offense. Last week, I think he was a lot more effective, and I think he'll continue to be so. I think he's getting much closer to 100%. So he will establish himself as that clear cornerback one, allowing the rest of that secondary to just sort of rotate around him. But overall, I kind of have to agree with what Ant said there. I think there will be opportunities. There will be times where Mike McDonald sets up something crazy to try and put Goff under pressure. And when you're sending that many guys towards the quarterback, one of Jameson, Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, and Reynolds, Raymond, whoever it may be, one of those guys is going to be open. So if Goff can retain his composure against that pressure, which so far this season he has, then there's going to be gaps there. So I don't think we're looking at this as a game where it's nailed on, we're going to shut it down because that's what we've been doing against other teams. It comes back to that thing of, but who are the passing offenses we played this season? It's not great. CJ Stroud's got better every week, but we played in week 1. And outside of that, it's been first-time starters and backups. So it's not been the caliber of offense that we're seeing this week. So I think we have to respect that. And whichever way we go, whether we do drop a little bit deeper to respect the pass, or we do step up to try and stop the run, it's going to open opportunities for the other. So I think that the breadth of playmakers, the breadth of talent across this Lions offense is something that we really have to worry about, and the defense is going to have to play to the kind of level that we know it can in order to keep ourselves on an even keel. So yeah, I'm more nervous about this game from a defensive standpoint than I have been about any of the others, because it's the one game where you look at it and go, there isn't that glaringly obvious weak point. It's not a Dorian Thompson-Robinson coming in so everyone relaxes. It's not a stuttering Steelers offense so everyone relaxes. It's not a pretty ineffective Titans offense so everyone relaxes. It's a really well-drilled, really efficient-looking offense that's seemingly getting better week after week as receivers gain confidence and Goff just continues to take things to another level. So it will be this real milestone matchup, I think, where I mentioned earlier on, both of us will have a real sense of where our teams are at coming out of this game. I think we will come out of it either with questions of, were we a bit hasty to post this as a Super Bowl caliber defense because it just got torched, or actually, is this a legit contender defense because we've just shot down quite an effective offense? And similarly on your end, you'll be looking at this to say, right, were we just getting lucky and getting a few good scheming games because we got shut down, or actually we're legit and we should be expecting a playoff run and we maybe should book our tickets for the NFC Championship game. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see where everything comes out. I think that matchup of your offense against our defense will go a really, really long way to determining how this game goes out. And it's going to be fascinating.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. 2 things left now, keys to victory and score prediction. And keys to victory sounds similar, but it's not quite. Imagine that your team has won the game and then work in reverse to how you got there. Ashley, if the Ravens win, how did it happen? And we've got a question from Grandizer in the chat, which is a slightly different wrinkle to it. Who's the player of the game for you in this victory?
It feels like such a cop-out answer to say Lamar, but it sort of is. I think for me, if we come out with this with a win, it's because Lamar has had not a glitzy passing performance, but an efficient passing performance. I think it will be one of those where it's high completion percentage, maybe not the most impressive yards per attempt or anything like that, but efficient, particularly on third down. I think it'll also be one of those stat lines for Lamar where it's really efficient running. So another kind of 6-7 yard per carry rushing day where maybe he goes for sort of 65, 70 yards, maybe a score. I think it's one of those days where it all needs to work. Lamar needs to work effectively as a passer. He needs to do what we know he can do as a rusher. And if we do those kind of things, coupled with the defense putting Goff in positions that he hasn't been in the first 6 weeks of the season, that will be the things that we look back on and go, that's why we won that game. So it feels incredibly cliche to just say it goes through Lamar, but when he's on it and the receivers are somewhat competent in a way that they were not against Pittsburgh, we win games, and that's how it works, because he's that effective and he's that dynamic. So I think it's him being efficient, a couple of big plays on defense, whether it's a pick or it's a fumble recovery or something like that, to just turn the tide of momentum. That for me will be sort of an encapsulation of the really fine margins that I think we're talking about in this game. It's one of those where I'm not seeing either team winning this by more than 2 points, because I think it's going to be one of those horrible nail biters. Hopefully it's Justin Tucker kicking a field goal with 2 seconds on the clock. Hopefully it's not from 71 yards, to keep bumping up that record or anything ridiculous. But I think it's one of those situations where it's going to be, we're right on the edge of our seats until minute 59, second 59, as the last ball goes up, however it goes up. So it's just efficiency. I think if we're efficient and we can win the turnover battle and we can do all those kind of things that are so cliche, then I think we can come out with the win. But if we don't, if we do some of those stupid things to shoot ourselves in the foot, if we're leaning too heavily towards the giving up flags style of aggressive defense, maybe it's one of those days that just spirals away from us.
I don't know about you, Matt, but I was just beginning to like Ashley. And then he mentioned the Justin Tucker kick. That is a legitimate source of PTSD for us. You have no idea how bad. That would have been our first win under Dan Campbell, that would have. And for y'all lot to knock it in from 60-odd yards that is a legitimate source of PTSD.
Don't pretend you don't know the exact yardage it was as well.
I'm trying to forget. There's
a few comments in the chat of mute him, please. So, and the Lions have gone to 6-1 against a really good Ravens team. How did it happen, and who's MVP of the game?
If we're going to win this, then Ben Johnson has to empty his bag of magic tricks out onto the table. And I think he really has to. This is the one where you show every single card you have with your offense, because it's a very good defense. They've, again, not given up more than 24 points this year, but also not scored above 30. So our best chance of winning is by putting up as many points as we can, because that offense hopefully won't be able to keep up with us. But you've got to get clever here. You've got to get the passing game going early, so you soften that box out, and then that'll allow us to start running the ball. And when we run the ball, then we'll start moving the chains, we'll start chewing the clock. We will get this game how we want it. So for me, Ben's got to have a tremendous game. I don't worry about the offense. It's executing brilliantly at this moment in time. The blocking, the receivers, Goff, everybody is executing perfectly. So Ben has got to call it right. And if we win, who's done it? J-Mo. Again, I will say this until I'm blue in the face. J-Mo is the one. Even if he ends up with a stat line like 4 passes for 70 yards and no touchdowns, something like that, what that will do is it'll back that defense up. And it will allow us, again, like I've just said, to implement the run game. That's how we win this. We open up the field, we give our run game a chance, we put points down on the board, and J-Mo is going to be absolutely critical to that. So Ben has his best day as an OC, and J-Mo is the one who unlocks everything else for us. That is where we win it for me. We can outscore them so that's what we need to do.
Just to add my 2 cents on the MVP of the game if the Lions win, I think it's going to be Branch. Just because if we do end up shutting the Ravens down on offense a little bit more than we score on our offense, Branch is the guy in terms of chasing Lamar down on the front or backside, and also the guy in coverage who might get matched up against Mark Andrews or have to cover Zay Flowers or whatever. So there's no more important game than our nickelback this weekend, whoever it may be. And if it's Will Harris, God help us all. But hopefully it's Branch, and he can continue his insanely hot start to the year. Right, score prediction, fellas. Ashley, going to give you the honour first. What do you think it's going to be?
Oh, I think it's going to be uncomfortably close for everybody involved. I think it's going to be. I feel like it is going to be one of those days where defenses seem to win the day. So I don't think it's going to be a particularly high scoring affair. I'm going to go. I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm going to pick a Ravens win, and I'm going to take that homer attitude because that's what we do. If I looked at my predictions pre-game last season, I probably would have had us going 17-0 because every single week I'd have said we'll win. It'll be close, but we'll win. So I think we will win. I think it's going to be something in the order of 21-19, 21-18. It's going to be that kind of late stop or late field goal kind of territory that everybody hates, no one likes. It's the best way to win, worst way to lose kind of game. That puts us in a place where we're patting ourselves on the back defensively. I think we're looking at that going, yeah, actually that was a great performance. Gave up some big plays, but did what we needed to do. That leaves us still with maybe a few question marks offensively where we're looking at it. And my bold prediction for the whole thing would be, of those 21, 7 comes from a pick six. I think there's going to be something. I think there's going to be one big play, probably middle of the third quarter or something. That kind of big turning point moment where someone like a Marlon comes down with one and takes it back. So I don't think it's going to be a complete offensive performance. I think it's going to be a bit stuttery, still a bit rusty, not quite that get right game that we're hoping for. But defense does enough to see us over the line.
And
I agree, it's going to be close. This is one score either way. It's not going to be like the Bucs and the Falcons where we can completely shut them down. But
so you're saying we're not going to win a 4th consecutive game by 14 points or more? That's what we're saying here.
That's what we're saying.
Okay.
However, I am going to predict a win because, again, it's not because I don't think the Ravens are good. I do. But I just have such a belief in this team at the moment. Our offense, it's got one of the most informed quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not saying he's a top 5 guy, but right now he's one of the most informed guys in the NFL. We've got, I think, the best offensive coordinator, young and upcoming in the NFL. And we've got the pieces to be able to bypass that fearsome run defense of theirs and to be able to put up points. And the defense, I think it's going to give up some. But again, at the same time, I fancy us to limit the damage that all their motion plays, that the running game can do. So I've got 28-24 to us. I think it's going to be very close. And hopefully in the 24 for them, it's 3 Lamar touchdowns to Zay Flowers, who also gets 100 yards rushing as well for my fantasy team. I'm conflicted. I've got 2 Ravens players in my fantasy team, so I need you all to put up some points this week. Just Lamar and Flowers, that's it. Nobody else. Don't pass to anybody else. Just pass to him. But no, I do have supreme confidence in this team. This is the hardest game left on our schedule. And I think this is where we lay down the statement that actually, you all can't put no more asterisk wins on us. We are legit for an NFC Championship run. So very narrow, but I believe in us.
I'm just having a look back at our predictions for the season so far. I
had this as a loss by a long way, I think. At least 8 or 9 points, I probably had this as a loss by.
12.
Oh, Christ.
So I
thought good of you in the preseason.
Yeah.
I just think more of our team now.
I had a loss by 6 in our pre-season, but I also had a 6-0 at this point.
Did
with
anyone
our
have us
first-
winning? I don't think anyone.
No,
I think it was a.
2 predicted wins. Tom predicted a win, and Ryan McCluskey predicted a win, both by 3. Even though I predict us to be 6-0 and then drop this game, we've been better than I expected, which seems really stupid to say, but like, I thought we would kind of warm into the season and grind out some gritty games to begin with and then look good. We've just looked good all season, and actually I think we've looked better through the season as well. So, and the Ravens scare me less. Like, watching the game in London and like going, you know what, it's not firing all cylinders, because really, even though the defense is amazing, it was the offense that always scared me, and it scares me less than it should. So I am also predicting a win. And for me, it's going to be a 4 scores for each team, with one trading a touchdown for a field goal. The field goal master will get his points, but it will be at the expense of some touchdowns for the Ravens. I don't predict any defensive points in this game, but I do think it's going to be, what did I have in my head? 22-16 to the Lions. So
I mean, Vegas believes in us. What were they? 2.5 point? Oh, are we 2.5 point dogs? We get 3 points for home.
3-point dogs.
And it's 3 for home, so they effectively believe we're evens in this.
Yeah, they do. But it's quite interesting. We predicted the Lions as a group would be 5-1 after 6 games, and we're right. So I'm going to take the win on that one.
I had the loss versus the I had us with 2 or 3 defeats by. I think I had us 3-2 after 5.
You had us 4-2 after 6, 3-2 after 5. Yeah, so you're about right. But anyway, we are going to close out the audio pod here. There's a few questions to rattle through, but we'll do that off the audio pod. Live reaction show on Sunday, as we always do. So join myself and Ash for the alternative broadcast. And then the review show will be Monday. Then Monday Night Football next week, which means our preview show for the Raiders is going to be on Saturday rather than Tuesday. So make sure to set your schedules accordingly. And don't forget to check out the College Football Podcast, because Ant hasn't been doing this just for the last 2 hours of this show, but 2.5 hours of the previous one as well. You're an absolute trooper, and you mad person. You can find us on Rural Lines UK on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now TikTok as well. Group for Wide fans on Facebook is Detroit Lions Fans UK 1 Pride Wide. You can see lots of lovely pictures from our own Ryan Farden, who went to Tampa, who's been in New York City and is on his way to Philadelphia. I don't know why he's not on his way to Maryland, to be honest, but there we go. I think he's seen 4 games this year, so he can be forgiven for that. See our preview articles on rotluk.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. Ash, final bit of the show here. Talk to us about UK Ravens, because you guys are fantastic. I know that you do the Twitter spaces for them, but we've talked to Ian a lot during the draft, and you're just a great group of guys who know a lot about football, and we've had lots of comments as you've been speaking saying, God, this guy knows a lot, which is just great, because we're exposing the Americans to lots of knowledgeable British people, which is great.
Yeah, it's a really amazing movement to be a part of, and I say that as someone who's had really no involvement in building it. So credit goes way back to the original UK Ravens Facebook page, which I think turned 20 years old over this weekend. There was a big Saturday night party in London before the Titans game to celebrate the 20th birthday of the UK Ravens. So that was an incredible event. But yeah, the podcast guys, so Gaz, Ben, Ian, Shane, James, and offline Foz, who runs the Instagram, they do an amazing job of finding different ways to keep fans involved. There is a WhatsApp group that's got hundreds of us in there, mostly UK, but a few worldwide. That is always going absolutely bananas. Every time an injury report comes out, people are talking about it. Every time there's some random trade rumor from a guy with 1 follower on Twitter, we're talking about it. So that is always going on. That has branched off into dozens of different redraft leagues, dynasty leagues, regional meetups, all of these kind of things, just because it's like-minded people that get together and have a chat. And you've mentioned the Twitter spaces there. That's something that I've started doing just in the last 2 weeks as a way of trying to take some of that WhatsApp discussion that we all go through post-game and just turn it into more of a town hall open forum. Because I think sometimes when you're working in a WhatsApp group, it's difficult to fully articulate the point that you're making, and it's often really difficult to have a one-on-one conversation with someone because there are also 200 other people that are trying to make a point. So having that ability to just talk it out, spend about 2 hours, I think we were on last night on Twitter, just talking things, talking about this game, talking about the Titans, talking about the weekend in London. But full credit has to go to those guys whose names I've listed there, because they have built a community that is ridiculous and so welcoming and so warm and always open for interaction and banter and all of those kind of things with opposing fans, but also fiercely loyal internally. And we had a tailgate event on the Sunday before the Titans game at a brewery just down the road from the stadium. I think it was around 550 Ravens fans were there at this event.
Wow.
And we all then had a march from this tap room to the stadium. And that is sort of goosebump moment as you're walking down to the stadium in this sea of purple on the way to see that team. And I think that was borne out in the stadium. I mean, we've talked about it in and of ourselves and patted ourselves on the back, but the difference in audience volume between when the Ravens were on third down, you could hear a little bit of noise. When the Titans were on third down, it felt loud and it felt different, and it felt like there were thousands and thousands of purple jerseys in that stadium on Sunday. So and that's all testament to the strength of the UK Ravens fan base. I think a lot of that we have to acknowledge is helped by Lamar. He's such an appealing player that the escalation in the number of UK-based Ravens fans has just exploded in the time that he's been a Raven. I have to count myself within that number. I'm such a new fan of the game that I am a Lamar era Ravens fan. So he is such an appealing player, such a dynamic and exciting player that he just forces people to want to watch the Ravens. So I think we're eternally grateful to him, but also the way that those guys have bottled that and captured that, and the work they do through the podcast, the work they do with building that community is amazing. So, but what I would also say is, this has been a really enjoyable experience, getting exposure to the Lions community. This feels like a really exciting thing that you guys are building as well. And it's a hard thing to do. So massive credit to you guys for continuing with it, because it's such a valuable thing for people in the UK who often can be the only person in their friendship group who really watches it. So you can really often find yourself in a place where you've not really got many people to talk about football with, particularly to talk about a specific team with. So to have a space, to have a Twitter community, to have a place like this on YouTube to come and chat with like-minded people is amazing. So all credit to the UK Ravens guys, and all credit to you guys for what you're building for the Lions.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming on and donating your time. We're just going to sign off with our guys here in the live chats. We're not signing off on the live chat, we're signing off on the audio podcast. So thank you to everyone for listening. Good luck on Sunday, everyone. Keep our fingers crossed. We'll see you for the live show. But for now, let's go Lions, one pride.
Look the Bears.
Recording stopped.
I don't know. We've been going a while, Ashley, so I don't know if you have a couple of minutes for some questions from the live chat, because we've had a few come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got no hard out.
Cool. So you've only had so many rookies and so many that are still on the team, but someone asked what order have they kind of impressed you the most of rookies that you have on the 2023 Ravens, or which 2 or 3 might you pick out? I mean, Zay's been exceptional, so I have to imagine he's one.
He's one, and it's really tough. So this year was really exceptional for us in that normally Eric DaCosta is an absolute pick hound. He will do everything he can to get comp picks. He'll do everything he can to trade guys just before the deadline or just before they hit free agency to get picks. He's been in the last few years an absolute master of amassing 4th round, 5th round picks to just take those dart throws, and those guys turn into the sort of depth pieces that we've been talking about over the actual recording. This year, we were really, really light on picks. Zay was our first. Roquan Smith, effectively our second after we traded that away, but I don't think I can count him as a rookie, even if he is a new addition. Outside of that, it's guys that we're probably looking to the future for. I mean, Andrew Voorhees in the 7th is one of those that we look at and go, he definitely would not have gone in the 7th had he not absolutely busted his leg at the combine. Yeah, the fact that he then still went and absolutely smashed the bench press will always live in my memory as just an elite mentality thing to do.
That was fantastic to
really
watch. I
excited for him.
loved that.
Just unbelievable. That enormous brace on his leg, and he's still, setting records in the bench. Unbelievable. So excited for him. I mentioned Trenton Simpson, excited for what he can be, but we haven't seen it outside of a bit of special team stuff. Tavius Robinson hasn't really shown anything. Caillou Blue Kelly, who we took in the 5th, didn't impress in preseason. I think we released and the Seahawks picked up or something like that. So he's gone now. We took defensive lineman Male Sala. I'm not going to try and pronounce his surname for fear of some kind of offense, but he's another of those guys. He's quite similar to Daniel Fa'alele, who we took last year, in that there's a lot of expectation because of size and physicality and mobility that he can be very good. But I think he's another of those guys that hasn't been playing football for a really long time, so has a lot of fundamental problems with hand placement and awareness and all of those kind of things. So it's another sort of forward-looking pick to say, well, it doesn't seem like John Simpson is the answer at left guard. Maybe if we can just be serviceable this year, maybe Salah is the guy for next year. So I think we're kind of looking to a space where we say, hopefully Trenton Simpson, Salah, and Andrew Voorhees are big players for us next year. But we're not really relying on them to do anything this year. Or if we are, we've got bigger problems if we're relying on those guys. So I think from this year's rookie class, it really is Zay, and then that's kind of it, because it's not impact players for the rest of the draft.
I think we've answered this on offense potentially, but who's your favourite Ravens player, one on offense, one on defense, and do you own any jerseys?
So, because like I mentioned at the sort of outro there, I'm an incredibly new fan.
Yeah.
So
how do you know so much, given that you're a new fan? Were you a fan of the sport before, or have you just completely come new to it? You've absorbed it.
This is my third attempt to get into the NFL, and it's the only one that's actually stuck for any longer than a game and a half. So my best friend, who is a Steelers fan, has always been into the game since we were sort of 11 years old. He's always been talking about it, always been trying to get me involved. So a long time ago, he convinced me to sit down and start watching it, and I got excited about the fact that the Bucks had a pirate ship in their stadium and had pirate logos. So I was like, I'll follow them. They seem cool. I'll follow them. And that lasted like one game, and I just reverted back to that classic, stereotypical sort of Brit attitude of, it's just rugby with pads on, and look, so many adverts, and it's so slow, and all this kind of blah, blah, blah. So I just disregarded it. He tried again a few years later, and I said, well, maybe if I can establish more of a connection to a team, maybe I can get in. I'm a Derby County fan, so we're the Rams, so I'll take the Rams. There's a natural link there. I'm clearly going to stick along this time. And again, it was like 2 games. No, it's not clicking. And then I think it was like 4 years ago, he sort of called me in a panic to say, we've set up a fantasy league, about to draft. We're a man short. I know you're not interested, but can you just be our last guy just so the league is viable? I said, all right, whatever. And it really was that kind of got me involved in a way that other fantasy sports have never. So I'm always one of those guys who plays Fantasy Premier League and then their team is just abandoned by October. Whereas looking at my Fantasy NFL team, that thing of, oh, my guy just got 1.2 from a 12-yard rush. Oh, their guy just got a touchdown. Oh, my guy just got a touchdown. That kind of constantly
It's a bit more instant
back and
gratification
forth.
from it.
It's
Yeah.
so, yeah, you're constantly flicking from, I've got a 70% chance of winning this week to, oh, it's only 45. And particularly on the NFL fantasy app, which we were using at the time, it would always come up with these highlights of, hey, your guys just scored a touchdown. Do you want to see it? And that was kind of my gateway into, oh, some of this stuff's pretty cool. Like when it looks like this, it's really awesome. And it just so happened on my team that year, I had Austin Eckler and I had Lamar. And those were the two guys that were sort of driving my team forward, always picking up points, always getting that yellow circle for a highlight. And so when it got to the end of the season, I was like, I think I'm ready to actually commit. I'm watching so much football just to see how my fantasy team is doing. I might as well actually root for a team and start watching it with some real vested interest. So I narrowed it down to those two. I kind of said, well, it's either going to be the Chargers so I can follow Austin Eckler, or it's going to be the Ravens so I can follow Lamar. And I went and spoke to my wife and said, look, I can either toss a coin or I can ask you to pick one. And she said, well, I think we should go for the Ravens. And I said, why is that? And she said, because Baltimore is where the musical Hairspray is set. And for no reason other than that, we landed on the Ravens. And I didn't know at the time, because of how green I was to the whole thing, I didn't know at the time how galling that was going to be for my best friend as a Steelers fan, for me to go into our group chat and say, hey, everyone, great news. I've picked a team. And he was like, awesome. That's amazing. Who have you picked? And then he was absolutely gutted when I told him who it was. And my other friend is particularly gutted to know where I am tonight as a rabid Bears fan. He's particularly sick to know who I'm chatting with tonight, but we have great fun. We have great fun with him every week, as their trials and tribulations go on. So it was that, and then I've always been one of those people who once I'm in, I'm in all the way. And so the advantage now compared to I think any time before is that there is so much 24-hour content. You can find anything you want to learn about things, to find things. And it's another great thing about the UK Ravens community is that there's such easy access to people who have been following this game for 35 years and know different route concepts and know different coverage schemes and know different sort of defenses and all those sorts of things. So I think it's just absorption through immersion that's led me to a point where I think you reach that point where you see how little you know, even if you've learned a lot. I think I'm at that point. I'm sort of opening out into, my goodness, I know nothing about this game. But actually, compared to where I was 3 years ago when I was first just watching people in little circles on their highlights, I know an infinite amount more. So it's just the excitement of it, and it's the immersion in it. So that was an incredibly long answer to quite a short question, but there you go.
No, I love it.
Me.
So, given how long you've been a Ravens fan, I'm going to speculate on favourite defensive players possibly being Marlon Humphreys, because he's been maybe the best defensive player you've had in that stretch, maybe?
Yeah, and also he's just really weird. Like he's just such a weird guy. Like his his Twitter feed is an endless source of amusement. He did a video for NFL UK over the weekend where he was reviewing British biscuits, and he keeps busting out this horrendous accent. So yeah, I think it is him, though obviously Roquan is making a very concerted effort to become everyone's favorite player, full stop, let alone favorite defensive player. What I have made a conscious effort to do in the last sort of 6 months or so, particularly in the off season when clearly not a huge amount was happening, I did make a concerted effort to go back and look into things like that famous 2000 Ravens defense, and to go back and watch that 2012 Super Bowl run with Joe Flacco, and just see all of those things that everyone talks about all the time. It feels like you don't know the Ravens if you haven't gone back and watched Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. So it's impossible to watch those guys and not have them on your list as favourite Ravens, because you only need to watch a couple of games of Ray Lewis and you just go, geez, he's unbelievable. Like what we would do with him now, and maybe Roquan enters that conversation of being in that same stratosphere. But yeah, I think any team in the league would take Ray Lewis off your hands right now if you offered it to him. So I think those guys make a push and getting a sense of that history and going back even further, trying to get a sense of how things happen with the Baltimore Colts and the Browns and all of that kind of history that put the Ravens in the particular cultural situation that they find themselves in is really interesting. So been doing a lot of digging to try and learn more about that. But as a pretty brand new fan, it's got to be Lamar on offense and Marlon / Roquan on defense, because they're just impact players. They're just guys that are without doubt in the top 5 in their position, and that's exciting. That's what you want to see.
And I have a question for you and Ashley, so I'll throw this to you first. I think you might have seen it already, actually. If you had a magic wand that could make one player on your current roster that's on IR completely healthy for the season, who would it be? And I feel like there's a really obvious answer here, but maybe there's 2 candidates.
Houston.
Oh, okay. You just picked someone from left field.
It's not from left field. I want Houston back right away. I want him back now. Like, I just want more edge rushers. Not that I don't care about CJ, but we've got Branch. I mean, for me, I want more depth in the edge room. It's good, but Houston's a game changer. He's just so good. I want him back on this team. He'd be perfect for a game like this week. He'd be absolutely perfect for this game. So I want J-Mo. I want Houston back now.
It's fantastic that you're picking a second-year, 6th-round pick who has 115 career snaps. I love it.
I ride and die with my 3rd-round picks. Rodrigo, Jamar. That's me.
Day 3 picks. Day 3
solidarity with my day 3 guys.
Yeah. I can't look past Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, yeah, we've got Branch, but on the back end, having him out, he was keeping Tracy Walker out of the team, and Tracy Walker looks like an absolute beast right now. So, to have safety be 3 deep with him there would just be incredible. I think we've got enough edge rushes. I love James Houston. I'd love it if he was back. But I feel like the depth is less secure at safety than it is at edge. So I'd go there. Ashley, what do you think?
I feel like there's a pretty obvious answer from our end as well. As much as I would love to have David Ajabo and to really see what he can do in Mike Macdonald's scheme, for me, it can only be J.K. Dobbins. The collective silence in the WhatsApp group during that week 1 game against the Texans when he went down, and then the following sort of collective mourning as we realized the gravity of it and the fact that this is a guy that has just been plagued by this stuff, and we're in a space now where not only his season is done, it could be so much more than that being done as well. We could be in a space where we're talking about this guy as needing to retire on injured grounds. So it's so desperately disappointing, because all of the conversation going into this season was he's back. He started to look better and better and better when he came back at the tail end of last season, even though one of his legs was completely straight when he was running because he still didn't trust it. With a full off season, nothing to worry about in preseason. We didn't see him. That's okay. He was going to come in and he was going to really hit the ground running and have a career year, give us a real problem at the end of that in terms of, do we pay him or do we let him walk? And now it gives us a really different problem at the end of this year in terms of, do we keep him in the hopes that we can get a cheap deal knowing what he is and maybe we see it, or do we just let him walk and say it never was? So it would be J.K. Dobbins, and we just feel for him. I'm slightly less delighted about him hanging out with Aaron Rodgers. That's never a good thing. You don't want one of your players hanging out with Aaron Rodgers. Whatever sort of dolphin therapy he's having on his Achilles, I don't want JK touching any of that. So we're concerned about what kind of locker room presence he might be if he does come back, if he's spending a year with Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, he'd be the guy for sure, because we had so much hope and expectation for what this season was going to be for JK, heading up that backfield, and for it to be so cruelly ripped away week one was just really tough.
I feel like what happened gives you the best chance of retaining him long term. I know that sounds really weird, but I don't see you paying him if he had a good year, and I do see him returning for vet minimum. So I don't see any reason why he'd go and play for vet minimum anywhere else, and I do think you'd give him a chance as RB3. So I can see him sticking around. Hopefully he gets healthy again, because I think he's still my favourite running back of that class. Even though he was taken in the same class as, I think, Jonathan Taylor, wasn't it? And DeAndre Swift. Dobbins has just got such talent, so hoping that he works out. And this is Lions related, but maybe actually because it's quarterback related, you might have a thought on it as well. Brian Shook and asked, how, since the head coach has been not talking about the fact that the Jared contract is coming, but we really need to keep him around, was basically the quote. How do you predict his contract situation playing out? I don't think it will be difficult, but when do you think he will sign it, and what do you think it will look like?
Well, I mean, it's been nigh on confirmed that it's coming during the bye, so we're going to be getting it very soon. For me, Brad is sensible. It's not going to be long. It's not going to be a 5-6 year thing. We've got him under contract next year. So for me, how I see it playing is it's going to be a 3-year deal with 2 years tacked on to next year. So that basically gives him 3 seasons after this. And what I'd do if I was Brad is I'd front load the 2 years. I'd pay him a lot in those first 2 years, so that if it didn't work, or if for whatever reason our window closes or whatever, you have a hard out on him. In year 3, and you can sort of either reset the guy, you can draft your next guy. It gives you more flexibility to give him more money early. So 3 years, including next year, and I think you're going to be giving him somewhere in the region of about 45 million a year. Again, the chatter that's coming out is that it's going to be more of a team-friendly deal. He's got enough money already. He's earned a lot. So I think you're going to see something about 3 years, 45 million-ish a year, and personally, I would front load the thing to give us more flexibility down the way when we have to start paying Amon-Ra, Penny, Hutch, all those guys. That's what I do. But it's coming. It's coming in the next few weeks.
Any thoughts on what we should be paying a player like Jared Goff, actually? Because he seems to have really hit his stride now, but he's had a good couple of years with us now, and it's never a good thing to let your franchise quarterback, as he appears to be, to go into the last year of his deal. So it feels like it's happening, but I know the league-wide thing is that Jared Goff hasn't been this elite guy, and that maybe he's changing some opinions now. But it feels like then a sort of a weird time to be, say, buying at the top, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it feels like he's in that tier of quarterbacks where the drop down to the next one is probably the most stark. And I think it's that feeling of, if it's not Goff over the next few years, then who is it? And where do you get them from? And how are you sure that that's not a significant drop down? So I think there's something in the kind of better the devil you know thing of just saying, actually, we know what he is. We know he's good enough. We know he can run this offense. We know he can deliver the things we need him to deliver. So why would we not bank on that for the next few years? So I think something that's in that ballpark of the sort of Daniel Jones contract, I don't think that would be egregious. I felt like that was a massive overpay for Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
I think actually Jared Goff has put himself in a place where he's worth that. So I wouldn't disagree at all with him getting that money. And I think the idea of front loading it so that he gets it, but you're still supporting that long-term ambition of keeping those elite guys still on rookie contracts, I think is really, really sensible and pragmatic. So I think it will happen. I think he deserves it to happen. And I think it's the right thing to do, because no one wants to be in that kind of QB purgatory that so many teams found themselves in. And once you've got a guy that's serviceable and above, you've got to just hang on. And, the risk of, we'll find a guy in the draft. Well, at the minute, you guys are going to be picking pretty late in the draft. So there's not a huge amount of opportunity to say we can just start going for the Caleb Williams and Drake Mays of the world and bank on those guys. It's not going to happen. So you have to at some point choose to stick and say, we've got a guy we're really happy with. Why would we not just pay him? So I think you will do the sensible thing, and I think it will be pretty universally agreed to be the right thing when he gets some kind of pragmatic, sensible extension. So yeah, I think it's the right thing to do.
I think he'll get paid a little more than Ant does. And I think it will happen, but I think it will be an extension to the current deal rather than a completely new deal and to tear up what's there. So I think he'll stay on his $30 million for next year, because I think that's his cap hit, or 31.5 or something like that, which is a great discount at the moment. And then I think the extension is going to be 2 more years, like Ant was saying, but keep the first year as it is. I think it's going to be 95 million fully guaranteed, with a roster bonus of like $25 million in that second year. And I think there'll be a year tacked on for cap purposes as void year to reduce the hit across the whole deal. And I think 47.5 seems a little high, but when the top of the market at the moment is getting nigh on 55 million and the cap's going up, I think that still represents a discount on the level of play he's showing at the moment, even though it's probably way too rich for most people around the league. He's our guy, so we don't have to care about the national noise on that. So that's roughly where I think that's going to be. That was our last question. I don't know, actually, if you have any questions for us before we sign off.
I suppose there's just a question of, realistically, where do you see this season going? I mean, it's easy to get swept up in looking really good, but there's always that thing of, if you find yourself in a position against an Eagles or a 49ers, is it purely any given Sunday, or are you looking at that and saying, actually, we're in that level? Where are you gauging how this season ends based on what you've seen so far?
So this answer might change if we beat you, but right now, I think my preseason prediction was 12-5.
Correct.
And to win a wild card game. I'm still there right now. I think it'll be. I think it might be 13 even, but I think I'm about bang on the money with 12-5. I think we'll win a wild card game, and then it depends. After that, if we can beat you at your home, and then I'm thinking we could make the NFC Championship game. I do genuinely think we could. And then it depends who we come up against. Because I think the 49ers are fallible. We've seen that. If you put the game on Brock, they become an average team. And the Eagles have been meh this season. I don't fear them again. So right now, 12 wins and a wild card win. We beat you. That'll go up.
I went proper homer in our predictions. I just did, and it's kind of actually worked for me, but I went 14-3 in the number 1 seed. Because I just entirely bought into the 8-10 finish last year, and we've carried that on. So I feel pretty legitimized by that, but we dropped the Seahawks game, which I didn't expect. And I had losses to you, to Denver at home. I don't know why, but I just bought into their defense. Like, that stat of them holding every team to less than 16 or whatever it was, I was like, well, that's not going to change. So if Russell Wilson picks it up, then we're going to be in trouble. That's clearly not happening. And at Dallas was my 3 losses. So again, with what Ant was saying, this game is really pivotal for us because we should roll the Raiders, really. And then we're into our bye. And our hardest games are at Chargers straight out the bye. And then Dallas. And then we've just got a bunch of shit teams. So even if we lose to you, we should probably pick up 12 or 13 wins. And if we can beat you, I do think 14 wins is good enough for number 1 seed. So, I don't know, we could get the bye and not even be in the wildcard round, and then if we lose the divisional round, we still haven't won a playoff game in 30 years, which is a bit annoying.
I'll take an NFC North to start with. Dominoes. Just winning the NFC North that's all we need to do this year as a minimum. Just win one, knock the dominoes over.
As a head-to-head matchup, in terms of personnel, we're not as good as the 49ers. We're not as good as the Eagles. But in terms of the way the team is playing right now, we're better than the Eagles, and the 49ers is I'll give them a 3-point spread and us a legitimate chance to win the game. I think they got a 40% shot against the 49ers or something, which I think is significant. I wouldn't have given us a chance last year, but we're just playing too well on both sides of the ball. And maybe you can throw some asterisks against the teams that we have faced, but we've absolutely destroyed what's been put in front of us, most of it. So, Kansas City look bad, but they've looked bad all season, really, and still 5-1 somehow. Have we made teams look bad, or have the teams been bad that we've played? It's a really big question. Like, if this is the only hard team apart from Dallas left, because I don't believe the Chargers are actually a hard team anymore, then we don't really get tested for most of the season, which is a big worry for me. We roll into the playoffs and it's
Yeah, but hang on. Mentally, these are very tough. Like, this is just a position the franchise has not been in since we were kids. So this is a tough schedule, regardless of what people say. You've won at Arrowhead. You've won at Lambeau. The Panthers kicked our ass last year. And mentally, it's tough to get over things like that. And I think we made them look pedestrian. We made the Falcons look pedestrian. We made the Bucs look pedestrian. On paper, no. But I think given where we've come from and what we're doing now, the defense is right in form. The offense is right in form. How many games over 20 points now are we? 15, 16? The Chargers were the last after that was 7 before they messed it up on whenever it was they played nationally. Was it Thursday night?
Yeah.
It's high standards at the minute.
Yeah, it is. High standards. That's where we're at. For the first time ever, I think, in our fandom. Because even in the Stafford years, it was all about fourth quarter comebacks. It wasn't really ever about blowing teams away.
And I think the coaching's top tier here. I think the coaching now is, like, we've had good teams before and they suck because of the coaching.
Yeah.
Like, to put it blankly, like, every time they've sucked because of coaching. Now we have good coaching. That's why I back us in games against the Eagles and 49ers. Everyone goes on about Shanahan being a great coach. I think our coaching's really good too. So it's just raising the ceiling of this team further. But this would be the statement one. One of these or the Cowboys on the road would really be a message.
I would
to outsiders.
If I had to go one on one of those two games, I would definitely pick the Cowboys.
Everyone would. Everybody hates the Cowboys.
Also,
especially as it's at their place as well.
It was nice to hear that the Rodgers hate is not just limited to NFC North teams as well. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I had no opinion. I really had no opinion on him until off seasons happen, and then suddenly you just go, man, he's just a bad guy. Like, he's just, when I refer to Marlon as a weird guy, he's weird in kind of a harmless, quite kooky way. Aaron Rodgers seems weird in a genuinely disturbing way, and I don't want him near any of our players. No. So it just feels like one of those guys that just don't want to be around. So I'm sure there's something in there about elite mentalities and winning sportsmen, all those kind of things. Sure, I get it, but I don't feel like you need to be completely off the deep end to be that guy. I think Lamar's won an MVP and he hasn't gone into conspiracy theory, sitting in a dark cave for 3 weeks territory. So, well, not yet anyway. So I don't think there's necessarily a correlation between being a weird guy and being a good sportsman. But he's a bad dude. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. We've been going for quite a long time, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Everyone who's still with us in the YouTube and Twitch chats, thank you for sticking with us for extra time. We'll see you on Sunday for the game. Have a good rest of your week. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.